Right. Good morning. I am Ward 4 Councilmember Janeese Lewis-George, and I'm Chair of the Committee on Facilities. It is 10:45 a.m. on Thursday, April 23rd, 2026, and we are holding this budget oversight hearing for the Office of Disability Rights and the Department on Disability Services via a hybrid format, with public witnesses testifying via Zoom and in person here in room 123 of the John A. Wilson Building, and government witnesses are present and testifying in person. The hearing is also being broadcast live on the council's website as well as janeeseward4.com/live. ASL interpretation and CART open captioning are available to attendees in the hearing room and participants in the Zoom webinar. The District of Columbia network cable broadcast will show the open captions, but not the ASL interpretation. And so if you are watching the hearing on television and need ASL interpretation, please go to janeeseward4.com/live or email facilities@dccouncil.gov to get the link to join the Zoom webinar. Here are some brief reminders for witnesses participating virtually. All witnesses participating in this Zoom webinar are currently listed as attendees. When it's your turn to testify, one of my staff members will promote you to be a panelist. If you wish to activate your video while you testify, you have to click the button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen that looks like a video camera. If you are a virtual participant or an attendee and need ASL interpretation, you can pin the ASL interpreters by moving your cursor over their viewing box and clicking the three dots in the top right corner and then click pin. If you need captioning, you can adjust the size, display, and location of the open captioning by clicking on the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen and select Show Captions, and then select Caption Settings. If you have any technical issues or questions during the hearing, please notify the committee staff via the Q&A function of the Zoom or by sending an email to facilities@dccouncil.gov. Public witnesses from bona fide organizations will be given 5 minutes to testify, and public witnesses from those same organizations will be given 3 minutes. All other public witnesses will be given 3 minutes. All testimony and pre-hearing documents have been submitted, are all available now on the council's hearing management system. And I ask witnesses to please do the following before their testimony. First, if you are comfortable, please share your pronouns before beginning your testimony, so my colleagues and I do not misidentify you. We do not want to offend anyone. Second, please begin with a brief description of yourself. For example, I am a Black woman in my mid-30s with short black hair, wearing a tan short sleeve pantsuit and silver pearls around my neck. Third, please be mindful of your pace. Let me remind myself that right now. Please be mindful of your pace when delivering your testimony for our fantastic ASL interpreters and captioners. And finally, if you've not done so already, please submit your written copy of your testimony for the record by either uploading it to the hearing management system or emailing facilities@dccouncil.gov. The record for this hearing closes at 5 p.m. on Thursday, May 7th. With that, I do not see any of my colleagues present at the moment, and so we will be starting with the Office of Disability Rights with public and then government witnesses, followed by the public and then government witnesses for the Department on Disability Services. I understand that many of our disability services witnesses are actually at an amazing program at the MLK Library, and so we will hear from them during that after that time period. For public witnesses, panel one, we have Tisha Cockrell, who is the president of the Friends of Riggs LaSalle Recreation Center, as well as Matthew Gilbash, the vice president of the DC Association of the Deaf. If both witnesses are online, and so Tisha, I will recognize you first to give your testimony. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning. Thank you, Councilmember and Chair Janeese Lewis-George. My name is Tisha Cockrell, and I'm the president of Friends of Riggs LaSalle Recreation Center. We are partnered with the DC Department of Parks and Recreation, and we have worked together with several site directors and the ever-changing staff at our community Riggs LaSalle Recreation Center. We are here today per our previous testimonies since 2019 to present via the Committee on Facilities, Performance, and Budgeting hearings. We wish to continue our plea to receive funds and assistance with site maintenance repairs, additions, and new item requests. Let me stop there. I forgot to say that my pronouns are she, her, and I am a African-American female in her 50s with brown rim glasses, long dark hair, and a gray blazer. So we've recently participated in several calls, meetings, and discussions with Department of Parks and Recreation, and we still have the problem of replacing and repairing the exterior entrance door on the Nicholson Street side, northeast side. The front door push bar is broken, and this door needs to be ADA compliant and is currently not in compliance. It needs repair and upgrade. We've contacted several departments regarding this issue. Now, I did receive a late in the evening email from DGS that said, "Good afternoon. I'm happy to report 2 updates. ADA accessible doors are on order for the front entrance to Riggs LaSalle Recreation Center, and installation is scheduled for this spring, and further upgrades for the roof as well." My question is, what part of spring will we be ready with the ADA compliancy of this door as spring ends in the 3rd week of June? And so that is my testimony for today, and I will stand by for any questions and concerns. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matthew Gilbash. Okay. Matthew has let the team know he is under the weather, and so they will be submitting, the DC Association of the Deaf will be submitting their testimony on our hearing management system, and so that will be a part of the official record, but he was under the weather and unable to testify. At this time, are there any other witnesses who wanted to testify under the Office of Disability Rights who are online or in person that have not been recognized before we move to government witnesses? If so, please raise your hand in the Zoom. And if you are in person, you can come sit in front of us. All right. Seeing none, we will then move to our government witnesses today. Here with us today from the Office of Disability Rights is Peter Steffen, the Interim Director of the Office of Disability Rights, Nok Trin, the Chief of Staff of the Office of Disability Rights, Executive Director Curry Cook of the Division of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing, Office of Disability Rights, and Allison White, who is the Executive Director of the Developmental Disabilities Council. Good morning, and thank you all for being here today. Before you begin your testimonies, I am going to administer an oath to you all. If you could please raise your right hands if able. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give on to Committee on Facilities is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Director Steffen, you may begin your testimony.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Chairperson Lewis-George and members of the Committee on Facilities. My name is Peter Steffen. My pronouns are he, they. I'm a middle-aged person with medium length wavy hair and a gray suit and blue tie. I am the interim director of the Office of Disability Rights, or ODR. I appreciate the opportunity to testify on the agency's proposed fiscal year 2027 budget. Mayor Bowser's proposed FY27 budget, GROW DC, was formulated with 3 considerations in mind: how to drive growth in our economy to fund the services and programs residents count on, how to keep families in DC and attract new residents, and how to create a business environment that draws new investments and creates new jobs. We're navigating a pivotal moment that demands a more deliberate approach to growth. The federal dollars that once expanded our programs in unprecedented ways have been exhausted, and the federal workforce reductions have introduced new pressures on our economy and the commercial corridors. That being said, let me be clear. DC is still growing. Revenues had slowed, but the city maintains a strong financial foundation on which we can build by making the kinds of strategic and targeted decisions that will allow DC to continue growing while delivering the high-quality services our residents depend on. And in this spirit, I'd like to address how the mayor's budget will directly benefit our residents with disabilities and reflect the needs and priorities identified by district residents. ODR leads the District of Columbia government's commitment to the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, and compliance with all other federal and local disability-related laws. The district remains a national leader in ensuring that government programs, services, and facilities are fully accessible to and usable by people with disabilities. ODR actively supports, promotes, and works to advance the protections available under the ADA and other related laws. Specifically, our agency provides guidance, information, and technical assistance to district government agencies and the public. Additionally, ODR conducts extensive training across all levels of district government, from new employee orientation to mandatory manager training, from risk and building managers to healthcare workers, attorneys, and agency leadership. ODR also provides administrative support to the federally funded Developmental Disabilities Council and the Mayor's Commission on Persons with Disabilities. ODR's Division of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing provides outreach and education through trainings on cultural competency, as well as community events that celebrate and promote the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing community in DC. The division's Effective Communication Program provides a unified system for ensuring effective communication is provided across district agencies. So for FY27, ODR proposes a total operating budget of $3,734,902. While this is a 4% reduction from FY26, we will continue with all our staff to fulfill our core mission. The proposed budget includes $626,312 in federal funding to the Developmental Disabilities Council to assist in implementing its next 5-year state plan from FY27 to 2031 to improve the quality of life for all district residents with developmental disabilities and their families, and $1,652,114 for the Division of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing, which includes full funding for the Effective Communication Program and supports strong daily advocacy for the community. The remaining $1,456,476 supports ODR's core technical assistance and compliance work with our 11 dedicated professionals whose commitment ensures the district continues to serve as a national model for accessibility. The FY27 budget will support several key initiatives, including continued engagement and work with all district agencies and their ADA coordinators in identifying and effectively implementing their annual ADA compliance plans. Continued expansion of training to district government staff across agencies at all levels. Continued partnership with multiple district agencies and community stakeholders to implement the district's 2025 to 2027 Olmsted Community Integration Plan, while leading the planning for the next 3 years. Coordination with the Office of Risk Management, DC Public Schools, and the Office of the State Superintendent of Education on streamlining school accessibility surveys and ADA standards-based recommendations. And expanded work with the Office of Chief Technology Officer to advance Title II digital accessibility training and compliance. ODR is proud of the district's progress towards full accessibility and inclusion under Mayor Bowser's leadership. ODR is committed to ensuring the District of Columbia serves as a national model of accessibility, and I want to express my deep appreciation for the staff of ODR, the division, the DD Council, as well as members of the DC Commission on Persons with Disabilities for their relentless efforts and commitment to improving district residents with disabilities' lives. In closing, thank you, Chairperson Lewis George and members of the committee for your leadership and support. ODR looks forward to working with the committee to advance accessibility and disability justice across the district. This concludes my testimony. My team and I are happy to answer your questions at this time.
Thank you so much. As you mentioned, ODR's fiscal year 27 operating budget is about 3.7 million and about 4% less from fiscal year 26. 4% is not a large cut overall, but for smaller agencies like ODR, even slight increases and decreases can have big impacts. I'm glad to hear that you all feel confident that you'll be able to fulfill your statutory obligations, but I still want to go through some of the changes just to understand what that actually is going to look like. For example, programmatic changes. It looks like there is a 13,000 or 59% reduction to property, asset, and logistics management. It is not at 9,000, which is where it was in 2025. Were there any one-time expenses that required it to be 22,000 in fiscal year 26? And is ODR not going to be able to do anything in fiscal year 27 that it was able to do in fiscal year 26 as a result of that reduction?
We got some cut in NPS, but we plan to continue our mission and won't let any of our work be affected. We understand the environment we are in, and all agencies are sharing the burden.
Okay. I understand that. There was a similar situation with training and development. When I look at it, there was a 61,000 or 40% reduction from fiscal year 26 to 27, but the 90,000 in fiscal year 27 is about the same as fiscal year 26. Were there any one-time expenses that required it to be 22,000 in fiscal year 26? And is there anything that you are not going to be able to do in 27 that you were able to do in 26?
We don't anticipate any changes to our training in FY27 based on those changes in the numbers.
Okay. I was encouraged to see what is a 15,000 or 55% increase to the budget for ODR's investigations unit. Director Stefan, can you elaborate on the reason behind this increase? And does that mean ODR expects to be able to conduct more investigations of ADA violations through the increase?
So I think our mission is to continue to ensure compliance through the ADA compliance plan, submission, review, and then follow up through that process. So the investigations, to the extent we receive complaints, we follow up through informal investigations, but the budget doesn't affect that process.
Okay. So what's the 55% increase? What does that go? What do you attribute that increase to?
Okay. Yeah.
That's good. Good morning.
Good morning.
The $55,000 increase is due to step increases and
okay.
other personnel adjustments.
Got it. Okay. That's what I want to understand. Okay. Thank you. I do want to talk about personnel and FTEs. I'm seeing a 370,000 reduction in continuing full-time and a 280,000 increase to account for part-time, temporary, and seasonal employees. The number of FTEs is the same at 26. Does this mean ODR is transitioning 2 of its full-time positions to part-time? And if so, what are those positions and why are they being made part-time?
No, the number of staff are the same. We actually net saved a quarter of a FTE in terms of the budget team that the division was using in the mayor's office. We are now utilizing our own budget team to help with that. So that's where the 0.25 comes from. And then as far as the positions, there's no change to the number as you noted. There are some vacancies, but those are two are being held for cost savings, and then two have been posted for the division, and then there is the attorney advisor and general counsel position that were part of the previous position I occupied, and so we are working on
Okay.
replacing, finding someone to replace me.
Okay.
basically. And
Um,
And-
go ahead. Yes.
And then the
thank you.
two vacancies that are currently in the two vacancies that are currently in the division, it's going to be filled very soon.
Okay. I'm seeing a 10,000 or 48% reduction to supplies and materials. The 11,000 in fiscal year 27 is still 10,000 more than in fiscal year 25. Why was the 21,000 needed in fiscal year 26? And how is 11,000 going to be sufficient for fiscal year 27?
so.
Again, we're just sharing the burden. It's cut across the district agencies that we are in the same boat as everyone else.
Okay.
And we feel confident that we can continue our core mission with the budget provided for those supplies.
Okay. And I'm seeing the same in purchasing and equipment, which was completely zeroed out from 7,000 in fiscal year 26. Why was that? Is there anything ODR will not be able to purchase in fiscal year 27 as a result of that being zeroed out?
So, yeah, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, we are planning to purchase some equipment to enable, better communication, laptops and the like this year, so that we are prepared next year for that not to have to
Okay.
be purchased.
Okay. So before the fiscal year closes out this year, you'll get whatever materials you need as a result. Okay. Both DCPS and DPR have dedicated ADA compliance projects in their capital budgets. The mayor's proposed budget includes 1.5 million for DCPS and 2.14 million for DPR in fiscal year 27. Was ODR consulted about the amount or which projects should be included in these ADA dedicated budgets?
So I don't know about how this aligns with the budget for those agencies, but we have been in close consultation with DCPS on surveying schools and also how to streamline that process going forward. So we have met with their chief operating officer and facility team and the ADA coordinator that handles the surveys to obviously provide ongoing guidance, but also at our last meeting in April, they are working on coordinating compliance surveys that they do for us with other agencies. ORM and OSSI both have similar compliance survey requirements. Some of those questions are significantly overlapping. So we're working with them to streamline that
That'd be
and
great.
try to make it more
Okay.
uniform.
We're happy to help if we need to streamline things so that they could be more timely and effective in what they report to you all. I understand, I think we talked about, according to the capital improvement plan that we see, DCPS plans to use all of the 1.5 million on an elevator replacement at Sousa Middle School. And Sousa certainly needs a new elevator. It is an older building and that is essential, but I'm concerned DCPS's entire ADA capital budget is only able to pay for one elevator for one school. As we talked about previously, elevators are a major ADA barrier at our D schools, and I don't think we can say ADA compliance and accessibility is being prioritized from a facilities perspective if we aren't adding sufficient funds to replace elevators that are consistently unreliable. So I guess my ask is that ODR reach out to DCPS and DPR to review how the agencies plan to spend the funding and to truly evaluate, which I'll ask them during their hearing, whether 1.5 million for an entire DC public schools budget is enough for ADA compliance budget is enough, given what we understand and know about the issues that are happening across the city, especially within our schools. And while we're talking about DCPS, what progress has been made with DCPS participation in the ADA compliance program? Have any plans been submitted? Section 5 facilities inspections been conducted since the performance oversight hearing?
Thank you, Councilmember, for that question. So since then, like I mentioned, we've met with the team at DCPS. They're making good progress on those surveys. They're not done yet, but they said that they would finish all school surveys soon.
Okay. Please let the committee know as soon as they are finished their surveys, especially because this time and budget is a critical importance for us to figure out what actually we need to be allocating to ADA compliance projects across the DC Public Schools and capital budget. We talked about ADA exterior doors during performance oversight hearing, and as you know, Ms. Cockrell shared her testimony for the entrance at Riggs LaSalle Recreation Center in Ward 4, and I guess they're scheduled to be installed in the spring. I want to thank you all, ODR, for engaging with Ms. Cockrell and the Friends of on getting this done for people with disabilities. We have a lot of seniors in Lamar Riggs neighborhood, particularly. Can ODR continue monitoring this project and ensure the ADA doors are installed this spring? And please let us know when you all receive notification that it is completed.
Yes, Councilmember, thank you. We will keep on top of that and provide updates. I was there yesterday to inspect the facility and talk with the staff there. So.
And then in addition to DCPS, I want to make sure you also take a look at DPR's dedicated ADA compliance projects and ensure that that is enough funding and support to also deal with what we know is a consistent systemic issue across DPR facilities, especially our senior centers with ADA compliance across the board. And if you need to make a recommendation, because my understanding is that they're having to order doors, ADA doors, if that seems to be a persistent or systemic issue across the board where we need to have more ADA doors just within the warehouse facility, please, we want to know if that's a recommendation you'll be making to DGS team and overall for DPR and DCPS. Okay. I don't have any additional questions for you, but I do want to turn to Director Cook. All right. We are going to turn to the Division of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. Director, there was a 124,000 or 7% reduction into the Division of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. Director Cook, where was this cut made within the division? And will the division be unable to do anything in fiscal year 27 that it was able to do in fiscal year 26 as a result of that cut?
I will defer to the director because he is responsible for the budget. So I do feel he's more appropriate to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director. Councilmember, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, there was a 124,000 or 7% reduction to the Division of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. And I want to understand where was this cut made within the division? And is there anything that this division will be unable to do in fiscal year 27 that it was able to do in 26 as a result of this cut?
So, and correct me if I'm not understanding the question, but my understanding is that the cut that you reference is related to the 110,000 listed on the local funds that were actually restored for the ECP program. So though it was initially suggested as a cut, I believe there was a policy decision to restore that to full funding.
Okay.
And my team will correct me if I'm wrong.
I would also, there are a couple of components of that. One is contract services that is cut or reduced as a result of consolidation of activities. But another component of that is, as Director Stephan had indicated, we had a budget analyst and a budget officer that were partially funded through Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing, which had at this point had been cut out for the fiscal year 27 budget as a result of no longer needing that type of support externally from OCFO.
Okay. I thank you for that. Director Cook, we are seeing the district government having to pay more for virtually everything from security to construction materials to disability supports and services. How have the costs for interpreter services been trending over the last several years? And are the budgets for the effective communications program sufficient to keep providing accommodations with rising cost?
So we contract out, can you hear me? We contract out with 3 vendors at the moment, and those bids goes out, the SOW statement of work goes out typically in May, June, and that's when we see whether or not the increase will be there. I do suspect there will be an increase, but I don't think there will be a significant increase to the point where we're unable to cover our services with the funds that we do have. If that is the case, we will circle back, but I don't foresee that because everyone is impacted by the economy, but everybody wants contracts as well. So we're trying to remain competitive. And in the process of remaining competitive, we're able to get a good value for the funds that we do have allocated to the program.
Okay, thank you. After the performance oversight hearing, the committee received testimony from residents who are of the hard of hearing community about their concerns with, I guess, representation, accommodations, and outreach. They point out that the hard of hearing community is the largest among the division's constituents. Is there anything in this budget specifically for helping out our hard of hearing residents?
We do not have any specific budget for any community, be it deaf, blind, hard of hearing, deaf, disabled, deaf people. We don't have any allocation for a specific community. All of our work focuses on the most marginalized, which includes hard of hearing community. We do have several hard of hearing members who are part of our staff. Of course, we are not going to identify them for privacy reasons, but they are represented not only in the staff, but also in the work that we do. We have a burgeoning relationship with the HLLA DC, which is the Hearing Loss Association of America of DC, that has a very strong hard of hearing presence, primarily senior citizens, which is, I wouldn't say unique, but definitely other districts, other states rather, sometimes the population varies. Where we're realizing most of our outreach is hitting is with hard of hearing people who are part of marginalized communities. So queer hard of hearing people, POC hard of hearing people. Those are the communities that we see are more responsive to our outreach and responsive to our resources and responsive to our events and programs. So that is where we're thrilled. We always want to make sure the hard of hearing community is represented. As someone who is hard of hearing, that is something that is absolutely crucial to me. And I always want to make sure that if we can enhance any partnership, the doors are always open. And not only that, but we're always willing to walk through their doors as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I want to ask, revisiting another topic we discussed in February, are the upcoming elections. We've been reached out by several members of various communities represented by you all collectively as an agency. During the council's administrative meeting on Monday, I asked Executive Director Evans about the Board of Elections efforts to make our elections accessible. I was surprised that the ADA coordinator position at the Board of Elections is currently vacant. That position, I believe, was posted earlier this month. I don't know what the likelihood of it being filled before what is a historic election and of a different nature, as there is a new system in place, as you all know, with ranked choice voting that's giving some anxiety to specific communities across the board. And while Board of Elections is doing education and training, because this ADA coordinator position is vacant at the Board of Elections right now, I have to ask, what is the Office of Disability Rights doing? What is about working with the Board of Elections during this moment? Who has ODR and the division been working with since the position became vacant? And has this vacancy impacted your ability to coordinate with BOE on making changes and making sure ranked choice voting is accessible for residents with disabilities and residents who are deaf, blind, and hard of hearing?
So we have been working with them for about 2 years now. The division, formerly the office, was and still is a registered voting site. So people can come up to, anyone can come up to any of our events, come to our office and become a registered voter. So we've always had a very strong relationship with DC BOE, even so to the point that we have monthly, I would say monthly workshops and trainings and outreach, both virtually, in person, Ward 8. I believe tomorrow our BOE Accessible Ranked Choice workshop will be at Martha's Table. So
Okay.
so we're trying to hit all the communities, all the neighborhoods, and all availabilities of time, right? Because some people are working during the day or they're not working, so they're only available in the evenings, so on and so forth. What I have been exceptionally pleased by is the fact that we're not working with one person. So even though the ADA coordinator is not there, it doesn't really impact us because every single workshop we have no less than 4 people from BOE show up.
Okay.
Sometimes they will even bring the machine. Our last session was really exciting because we had a deafblind constituent who said, "Oh, for the first time, I finally understand how to use these machines," right? And this was for ranked choice, which people think is, super complicated. But once you get a little bit of information, it's pretty like, oh, okay, I get it. And so we're really thrilled about that. So our relationship with BOE is absolutely very, very strong. And what I like about them, and I wish all district agencies could follow suit, is they don't think that it's the responsibility of the ADA coordinator to be accessible. They think it's all of their responsibilities, and that's been working really well for us. So I'm not concerned, I should say, about the agency having that vacancy because they're not reliant on one person to be accessible. They want to make sure everyone understands the rules. They've taken our training, we've taken their training as well, become a registered voting site. So it's been absolutely positive on our end.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to hear those efforts.
And I just want to echo everything that Director Cook said. I think kudos to the division for hosting a number of lunch and learn sessions on ranked choice voting, virtual as well as in person in different wards, Ward 6, Ward 8, Ward 4. And we've already signed an MOU with BOE to have vendor support ASL interpretation for their content. And then we also ODR has also done other outreach, 12 outreach events in the last couple of months at senior centers and rec centers to provide information and outreach on this. We hosted partnered with BOE at the Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month award ceremony. We actually had a voting machine there, so people could test it out, and then also worked with DDS to bring BOE to their provider and community forum to speak specifically, target the disability community, not just people but also families and providers. So through that we've reached over 400 people. So yeah, it's been great.
Okay. If you all, it sounds like things are going well. Do you all plan on providing on-site support during election day and during early voting?
Yes, we're working with BOE to make sure that we have accessibility at minimum one in-person ASL translator in each ward, at least one location in each ward. We're still trying to figure out the site where that would be most applicable. So for example, Ward 5, has a significant population, Ward 6 as well. So we're still trying to fine tune and figure out which exact location would be, but every single site will also have VRI option, and which is virtual remote interpreting. So if someone says, no, I don't want VRI, I want in person, BOE is ready to deploy someone out there if needed.
Right.
And in addition to effective communication for facility access, in advance of the early elections and election day voting, we have our team, as they're available, to go out to the sites and survey for facility access, physical access, and making recommendations to the board as needed to make modifications either to
Great.
the sites or to change those sites as needed. But yes, we're working, and to answer your question before about who we're working with, our point of contact has been Terry Stroud, the general counsel. So she's been fantastic to work with.
Okay, great. Thank you all. And as you all make observations on election day for the primary, the hope is that you'll give recommendations for the general election if you see anything where improvements should be made or anything that work that you think needs to be continued in that respect, to just be monitoring that, as we have gotten emails and letters to the facilities committee and making sure that you all are a part of this process, and that their communities, that your communities that you represent are represented in the thoughtfulness of how this is rolled out. So thank you. From what I'm hearing, that is happening, and I appreciate those efforts, and I will communicate that back. The last thing I want to address before we move on, last year when the mayor proposed moving the mayor's office of deaf, blind, and hard of hearing out of the Office of Community Affairs, we were assured the placement into DDS was purely budgetary and the office would be able to function completely independently. As you all know, this committee decided to change the destination of the office from DDS to ODR. Since then, this committee has received lots of inquiries and testimonies from deaf, blind, deaf disabled, hard of hearing, and latent deafened residents about moving the mayor's office of deaf, blind, and hard of hearing out of the Office of Community Affairs. And now the division has been operating within ODR. Some are happy that the division has now been able to better focus on its statutory mission of ensuring compliance and doing outreach targeted at its constituencies, rather than needing to participate in general public events put on by the executive's office of the mayor. While some are worried the division will not have the ability and budget to serve the needs of the constituencies that the division knows better than anyone else in district government. Given the large interest in the future of both offices and the wide range of changes that could be made, I don't think a budget support act subtitle without a robust legislative process is the proper way to consider and make those changes. And so with that said, we are going to do our best to have the conversations we need to have within the committee and with participating organizations as well as the community. What I want to know, ODR will, if you all will allow the division to execute its mission as it sees fit within the bounds of the division's budget and Establishment Act.
Yes, council member. We have been working with the division to identify and set its own priorities based on communities, input and aligned with the codified duties.
Okay. And I want to ensure that ODR and the division will work collaboratively to best serve district residents, employees with disabilities, and those who are deaf, blind, deaf, disabled, hard of hearing, and latent deafened. Is there anything else either of you would like to add on this particular subject? Okay. All right. With that, those are all the questions I have for you all. We will now take a short break and then resume with budget oversight hearing for the Department on Disability Services, starting with public witnesses and then turning to our government witnesses. Thank you. We will now begin on the Department on Disability Services, starting with public witnesses. I will invite our first panel of public witnesses, Robert Warren, Talib Kareem Muhammad, Celeste Stroman, Robert Kennedy Jr., Co-Vice President of Project Action, Victor Robinson, Peer Mentor, Project Action, and Leonard Stevens, Advisor, Project Action, and Carrie Flora, who's the Senior Attorney at Quality Trust for Individuals with Disabilities. All right, before we begin, I just want to reflag for speakers to be mindful of your space of speaking, especially while reading, for the sake of our interpreters and captioners. All right. I don't see our first witness. So Attorney Talib Kareem Muhammad, you will actually be first up if you're ready to begin your testimony.
Checking. I want to first of all start by giving thanks to the Almighty for blessing me and blessing us to be here today. Good morning, Chairwoman Lewis George and members of the Committee on Facilities. My name is Talib Kareem Muhammad. I am an engineer, lawyer, run a nonprofit organization called STEM for Us, also a technology platform named Abe Legal that helps people to find quality and seasoned lawyers as easy as getting an Uber. And I have been talking about how we can make DC safe, affordable, and free as a candidate for mayor. Today, I'm here to testify on behalf of the residents of all 8 wards in response to the proposed fiscal year 2027 budget for the Office of Disability Rights. We believe that the District of Columbia, as the capital, should be the national model for accessibility. However, the reality is that our streets tell a vastly different and far more dangerous story. This was no better clear of a contradiction than during the winter storm catastrophe. During the severe snowstorms earlier this year, the district government's snow removal performance was abysmal. That failure actively endangered our disabled residents. We witnessed a complete breakdown of basic government services. What do I mean? Impassable infrastructure, sidewalks were narrowly shoveled, and critical curbs, cuts, and ADA ramps were completely blocked by the mountains of plowed snow and concrete, or snowcrete, if you will. The dangerous alternatives. Because the district failed to clear these pathways, district residents who rely on motorized wheelchairs and walkers and canes were forced into a unsafe pedestrian zone and into, in fact, busy, dangerous streets. I'm sure you all saw the picture of the disabled woman trying to traverse in the snow-filled streets. I know my time is coming to an end, and I'll just say this. that as the next mayor, you can count on me making sure that our disabled and our senior residents are never put into such a position. The council's oversight of the department was totally a failure, and we will work and make sure that we do everything necessary to prepare for the next snow disaster. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Robert Kennedy Jr., co-vice president of our Project Action.
I'm gonna say good morning. I hope it's still morning.
Good morning. Yep, 7 more minutes. Still morning.
I'm gonna say before I start, I'm gonna say congratulations on you again, because I hope you be the next mayor and stuff like that. But
Thank you.
my name is Robert Kennedy. I live in Ward 5. I work at RCM of Washington. My thing, like I said, a couple of days, like people with special needs. I have special needs too, also. And talking about job wise, people with special needs need jobs, really to work, really to be doing things, learn how to do a lot, like I did back in the '70s when I worked at the National Relations Board, and where how to learn be supply clerk, learn how to move typewriters, computers, and all that stuff. But the other stuff where they need to be doing. Also, not DDS. Oh yeah, DDS. I have people in my home helping me. The time of laundry, I know how to do laundry, but going out, going to the doctor, going to different places, need to go places where they're supposed to be doing, where we're getting help, you know. Georgetown have had helped me out where the doctor that like I went to the doctor a couple months ago for my hip, and the doctor going to ask them questions. They're supposed to ask me questions. They're supposed to do the whole 9 yards. What else? The Medicaid. I've been sitting in front of y'all talking about Medicaid. I've been hearing, I don't know, I've been hearing that we can stop Medicaid to do this and stuff. We need Medicaid. My age and the children. Why I say that, because if we stop Medicaid and where I'm at right now, I'm gonna have to pay and all that stuff. One year I used to campaign and fund y'all at City Hall here and stuff like that. But the Medicaid thing, we need the Medicaid. We need to where they're supposed to be, and with how my age and stuff, how do we get around getting equipment, doing something free, or what are we supposed to be doing? Hey, you have any questions? I'm here. I will.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we will hear from Carrie Flora, who is the senior attorney at Quality Trust for Individuals with Disabilities.
Good morning, Chair Lewis George. My name is Carrie Flora. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white American Indian woman with long dark hair. I'm wearing a white blazer. I am the senior attorney at Quality Trust for Individuals with Disabilities. QT is a nonprofit organization that has been advancing the interests of DC residents with developmental disabilities since 2001. QT monitors the quality of the services provided to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and advocates for whatever changes or improvements are needed to enable people to live full, healthy, and meaningful lives. Since our founding, QT has supported thousands of people with disabilities through our legal, lay advocacy, and monitoring programs, as well as systemic initiatives. Quality Trust recognizes and understands the difficult revenue decisions the mayor is facing this year. We are thankful the mayor is prioritizing people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we are pleased that the mayor has proposed to increase the Department on Disability Services budget to ensure people can continue to receive the support and services they need. Quality Trust asks the council to request more transparency from DDS regarding the potential implementation of a waiting list for services under the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Medicaid waiver. The Department on Disabilities Administration waiting list policy, established in 2022, states that DDA will establish a waiting list if the maximum number of if the IDD and individual and family support waiver slots are not available because the maximum number of participants are being served. In the last year, DDS has stated that despite the number of waiver slots they asked the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to approve, and despite those slots not yet being filled, they plan to implement a waiting list. DDS has not explained how they have determined that the maximum number of participants is being served pursuant to their waiting list policy when there are still IDD and IFS waiver slots available. We asked the council to require DDS to explain how many IDD and IFS waiver slots the current budget proposal would fund and how much additional funding DDS estimates would be needed to avoid the need for a waiting list. Ultimately, Quality Trust supports the mayor's budget proposal for DDS at a minimum, and we urge the council to support the proposal as well. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I want to check and just make sure there are no additional witnesses online. Robert Warren, Celeste Stroman. Okay. Talib, thank you for highlighting the deficits in the district's government response to recent snowstorms, particularly in not accounting the need for residents with mobility disabilities to navigate our sidewalks and intersections. What specifically will you like to see DPW and DGS do differently? And how do you think ODR, Office of Disability Rights, and DDS, Disability Services, can help improve the level of accessibility to the district's next snow response?
Absolutely. Very good questions, Councilmember. And I totally believe that there was a failure of vision. There was no clear use of just the basic tools that we have, like atlases. I'm an engineer, and so I know that there are predictive methods and algorithms that suggested that the snowstorm was, in fact, going to even be worse. But we chose not to use technologies like AI and other mechanisms that were available to us to plan and predict and prepare. And particularly for what should have been done to make sure that our disabled residents were not stuck in their home, not able to go to either doctor's visits or go to places of worship or go and get groceries. I had some neighbors tell me that they were literally not able to leave their house for weeks. This is unacceptable. So I think that, one, we need to use the technologies that are available, and two, we need to make sure that our agencies, such as those that are responsible for the disabled and the seniors, are working lockstep with those agencies responsible for things such as snow removal. And lastly, I think that New York did a great job by employing its own residents when there were a lack of city resources, a lack of either shovels or a lack of people who had plows. They reached out to the great people of New York to actually solve the problem. Why could not we have done the same here in the District of Columbia? We are going to be the capital, which is, again, supposed to be the model. We should be leading, not following. And prayerfully, as the next mayor, we will actually do just that.
Thank you for your response there. I want to come to you, Robert. First of all, just talking about jobs in district government for people with disabilities. How are you able to, get connected to jobs, and what can we do to make it easier for people with disabilities to get connected to jobs in district government? And what kind of jobs should we be
Okay.
thinking about?
Where I work at RCM,
Mm-hmm.
they have people come in that hire for people for jobs and stuff like that, sitting just like yesterday. Somebody came in
Mm-hmm.
for different jobs, and I mean, and then they the person go with the person with the jobs, and with the jobs they asked for. Okay. It's like every Wednesday and Thursday somebody comes
Yeah,
in.
good.
Yeah, and also the person have tell me who's coming in. Okay, I'm sitting at that front desk.
Yes.
They supposed to tell me who coming, who's what, and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I, when they sign in, I go take them to the person. Sorry, go to the person and stuff like that.
Wonderful. And then I know you talked about your doctor visits, and I agree, Medicaid is so critically important for communities.
Okay, let me stop you from there.
Yeah.
No. Okay, you know why I say that? Because also I'm with Georgetown students,
Okay.
and Dr. Buddet, they had taught me how when you go to the doctor, they not supposed to be signing my name. They
Okay.
do not when the doctor asks questions, okay? My aide, they not supposed to be asking no question. They're supposed to talk to me.
Yes.
Talk to me. Because a couple of weeks ago, I went to Georgetown and had my aide went with me. Can I ask a question? I said, no, you can't ask a question. You supposed to look at me, not,
Understood.
you know?
Yes. So advocating for
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah. I mean, I've been doing it, but it's what I was like back then with Project Action. I don't know, I was kind of nervous, but now I'm more out, I say out there, but more
Yes.
doing now and more listen.
Yes.
And I stayed at DDS. I had learned and stuff like Georgetown and stuff. So if you don't really listen and learn, and some of these people say, oh, no, you're not supposed to be doing that. No. I'm 74 years old. And you're not gonna tell me about this and that. I had great teachers, especially Allison White too. I had great teachers. And if you had great teachers, if you listen, you would learn a whole lot.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Ms. Flora, thank you for your testimony. I'm going to ask DDS all of the questions you raised about the waiting list. I know they're anticipating those questions coming from me because I share some of your concerns. If a waiting list is imposed and residents how do you think, and residents are put on it, how do you think a waiting list will affect providers? Will a waiting list change how individuals are connected with providers?
That's a great question. I know that Ian will be testifying today, and he can probably answer that question better than I can. But I can imagine that it would impact providers and everybody and across the board, and that's why we as advocates, I think, all share this concern around the waiting list and the impact that it will have on everybody that is served and providers as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I want to thank this panel of witnesses. We are going to go to our second panel of witnesses. Ian Paragal, Executive Director of DC Coalition of Disability Service Providers. Robin Shafford, the faculty member, Georgetown University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. Sandy Bernstein, Legal Director of Disability Rights, DC at University Legal Services. And then Victor Robinson, Peer Mentor Project Action. Leonard Stevens, Advisor, Project Action. And Ricardo Thornton, Senior, Co-President of Project Action. And I know they may be joining online, and so we will give them time to do that. Before we start, we're actually going to take a 2-minute break for our captioners. Thank you all very much. We will now begin with Ian. Good.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Am I on?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes, you are.
I am Ian Paragal, he, him, and I serve as the Executive Director of the DC Coalition of Disability Service Providers. I'm a middle-aged white man with glasses. The DC Coalition currently represents over 50 provider agencies supporting over 2,300 persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities and employing over 6,000 staff. On behalf of the IDD provider agencies and those whom they support, we are concerned about the cuts that were proposed in the FY27 budget as they relate to DDS. Specifically, 3 things. The reduction of the administrative fee support funding known as CLIN8 line item, the freeze on the continuation of the funding for the DSP Rate Payment Act, and the continuing lack of funding for the elements of support under the Human Care Agreement, or HCA, as the cost of living in the district continue to rise. I'm going to focus my comments today on the reinstatement of the administrative fee, since quite frankly, that's the area of concern with the most immediate impact. As I noted in my oversight testimony, the coalition anticipated the mayor's FY27 budget would fail to include the necessary funding to reinstate the administrative fee for residential services for the 2027 fiscal year. This reduction amounts to approximately $1.6 million in savings for the district, but the harm that this reduction will have on the provider world is substantial. IDD providers have been operating in the red for years as the result of continued turnover, high vacancy rates in the industry, and most recently in November 2025, DDS began an HCA accounting initiative that has resulted in tens of thousands of hours of additional administrative work for the provider community, as I shared more fully this past February. Given the extensive scope of the submissions that each provider now has associated with its HCA reconciliations, in conjunction with the other continued underfunding and increased support costs, the DC Coalition seeks the reinstatement of the administrative fee tied to residential services. Because the Facilities Committee has astutely recognized the actual need for this funding, the proposed departmental reduction has been partially reinstated over the last 2 years. For FY27, again, DDS's reduction proposed for this line item in the budget only pushes human service providers further behind and destabilizes supports. For this reason, we ask that this 1.6 million be reinstated or allocated by the council toward the budget in order to bring the administrative rate fee back to the total supplemented FY26 amount. And while some of the other budgetary concerns within my testimony are more detailed, let me just touch on a couple areas. We're concerned that the direct support wage allocations of the DSP Rate Payment Act are not included in the financial plan for future budgeting purposes. From 2014 until the implementation of the Rate Payment Act, the DC Coalition provided data and analytics which demonstrated that because the DSP wage was eroding, workers continued to leave the direct support workforce. And as a result of that analysis, the act was unanimously passed by the council. The act provided that the district would adjust the funding formula for provider rates to account for the continuing budgetary allocation of 117.6% above the DC living wage for all HCBS waiver and ICF DSPs. This 117% factor was extended to the wages of the home health aides through a separate budget support act in 2021. Further, in 2024, the DC Council approved the Certified Nurse Aide Amendment Act, which actually increased the target for direct support hour rate to 120% beginning in FY26. Given these legislative actions, we remain troubled by the administration's decision to continue to freeze the implementation of the DSP Wage Act and wholly set aside the 120% funding aspect of the CNA Act. By the end of FY27, we will already have dropped to 12.8% above the minimum wage, with over 27% of these gains lost. As the minimum wage increases in the district, vacancies will rise along with the operational losses associated with those vacancies. And we will again find ourselves in a crisis, having to again advocate for mechanisms like the DSP Wage Act. We learned how to remedy this crisis almost a decade ago. I don't know why we're choosing to repeat the same mistakes. Lastly, while we echo the testimony of the last 3 years regarding rental costs, food, clothing, and household allocations, we know at some point the district is going to need to tackle the fiscal implications associated with these issues. The FY27 budget continues to fail to increase the rental stipend associated and allocated to persons receiving services. Rental reimbursements, which were already behind market rates, have not been addressed in 4 years now. And finally, the lack of adequate funding for basic necessities such as fresh food, cleaning supplies, clothing, and utilities under the district's human care agreement should signal to our leaders that an inherent inequity does exist for persons receiving supports through DDS, and this inequity must be addressed. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this testimony, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Please stay on for questions at the end. Next, we will hear from Robin.
Thank you, Chairperson Lewis George. Can you hear me? I'm Robin Shafford. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an older white woman with short silver hair, wearing a black and white dress, a red necklace, and tortoiseshell glasses. On behalf of the Georgetown University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, thank you, Chairperson Lewis George, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today. The Georgetown UCID is a federally mandated and funded program of the Administration for Community Living, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's part of a national network of 68 UCIDs that began in 1963 with university centers in every state and in U.S. territories. Georgetown University is the UCID for the District of Columbia. Ensuring that DC residents with intellectual and developmental disabilities can lead
I'm so sorry. The interpreters can't hear you well. If you could move your microphone closer.
Have to move me closer.
Or you, yes.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Ensuring that DC residents with intellectual and developmental disabilities can live self-determined lives in DC's communities must remain a priority. The Georgetown USID thanks the mayor for proposing a $3 million funding increase for DDS in her budget. Notwithstanding this proposed funding increase, DDS is unable or unwilling to inform this council and the public how many people will be able to receive Medicaid waiver services during fiscal year 27. Rather, DDS is again raising the specter of instituting a waiting list. Following the passage of the FY 2026 budget, DDS announced that it planned to institute a waiting list for services under the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Medicaid waiver as soon as it was permissible to do so. Until its recent performance oversight hearing, DDS maintained that because the FY 26 budget included $1.68 million less than requested, DDS would be required to implement a waiting list for the IDD waiver as soon as it was permitted to do so in light of American Rescue Plan Act requirements. DDS did not state that the reduced funding appropriated by the council meant that a certain number of waiver slots would have to remain unfilled, but rather claimed that it would not be able to fill any of the open slots. At the recent performance oversight hearing, DDS Director Reese stated that no waiting list would be instituted during this fiscal year. Even though it now appears that DDS will not create a waiting list during FY 26, DDS has indicated that the FY 27 budget contemplates institution of a waiting list. DDS declined to state at the budget forum it held on April 17th what amount of additional funding would obviate the need for a waiting list. For years, DDS has informed the council and the public that there are a significant number of open slots in the IDD waiver, as well as in the individual and family support waiver. This has been widely understood to mean that each open slot could be filled by a DC resident deemed eligible for DDA services. According to the presentation from the recent DDS budget forum, there are currently 80 open slots in the IDD waiver and 74 open slots in the IFS waiver, yet the presentation states, notwithstanding the number of slots, enrollment is subject to available resource, thus rendering meaningless the number of open slots. The council should demand that DDS explain with specificity how many additional people it will be able to serve under the IDD and IFS waivers. Okay, I'm sorry. If the council enacts a budget that funds DDS at the level requested by the mayor. The council should also require DDS to explain how many waiver slots will be available if the council enacts a budget with a funding level lower than requested in the mayor's budget, as well as how much additional funding would need to be allocated to DDS to obviate the need for a waiting list if there is such a need under the mayor's funding request. Further, DDS should be required to explain with specificity how it plans to determine when there is adequate funding to lift any waiting list imposed in the future. Absent this information, the council and the public remain in the dark about whether and when DC residents newly deemed eligible for DDA services will be able to receive the vital supports offered under the IDD and IFS waivers. I also want to note that the Georgetown USID shares the concerns that Mr. Paragal raised. Our system of community-based services and supports relies on the provider network and unpaid family support, and it's essential that we continue to enable both of those groups to provide that support. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Sandy.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Councilmember Louis George and members of the Committee on Facilities. My name is Sandy Bernstein, and I'm the Legal Director at Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a white middle-aged woman with brown curly hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a pink sweater. DRDC is the federally mandated protection and advocacy program for people with disabilities in DC. And as the protection and advocacy program, DRDC has represented hundreds of individuals supported by DDA and RSA and has assisted even more through our systemic advocacy and investigations. In a tight budget year, DRDC is pleased that the mayor has increased DDS's budget by $3 million, with $2 million of the increase going to DDA. DRDC appreciates the mayor's decision to provide this funding increase to DDS as the agency provides critical services to both DDA and RSA through DDA and RSA to DC residents with disabilities. At the April 17th budget forum, DDS Director Andy Reese stated that despite the $2 million increase to DDA's budget, there may be a waiting list for waiver services in October 2026. DRDC is not only troubled by the thought of an impending waiting list, but also on the lack of transparency about how DDS is determining if and when there will be a waiting list. For years, DDS has come before the City Council and provided information about the number of slots in the Individuals with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities waiver and the Individual and Family Support waiver for DC residents. It has always been understood that the number of waiver slots DDS has asked the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare and Medicaid Services to approve is the number of slots that they are prepared to provide to DC residents with IDD. We understand that DDS must have the resources to have the waiver slots available. In its waiver application, DDS requests the number of slots from CMS it believes it can support. DDS has now changed its narrative in the past year for the first time, stating that the numbers of slots they request from CMS is really meaningless because they can just claim they don't have the resources, despite what they stated in their application, and then make none of the open slots available. After the fiscal year 2026 budget was passed, despite having close to 100 slots available in the IDD waiver, DDS stated they would have to institute a waiting list because City Council decreased their budget by $1.6 million. At DDS's oversight hearing a few months ago, DDS announced a waiting list would not be instituted in fiscal year 2026 due to requirements from CMS under the American Rescue Plan Act. Now the mayor has increased the budget by $2 million, and DDS states it may be forced to institute a waiting list in fiscal year 27, despite having 80 slots in the IDD waiver and 74 slots in the IFS waiver available. When asked at the budget forum how much funding DDS would need to avoid a waiting list, Director Reese failed to provide an answer. DRDC assumes DDS must know this information, but is not sharing it with the council, DDS consumers, stakeholders, and the public. If DDS believes it must implement a waiting list, they need to be transparent about the deficit they face and then alter the number of waiver slots they have available based on the actual budget shortfall. If DDS finds they do not have enough funding for all the waiver slots, they should calculate how many waiver slots they can afford to fill, submit an amendment to CMS with that adjusted capacity rather than simply announcing that they were revoking all open slots. DDS should report to the council what amount of funding they would need to avoid a waiting list, how much DDS budget for each waiver slot, and how many waiver slots they could fill with the mayor's current budget recommendation. DDS should also report on if there is a waiting list, how and how often they will assess whether an individual can be offered a spot off the waiting list. Director Reese also mentioned at the April 17th budget forum that DDS had had some savings from reducing services from people supported by DDA and its providers. While DRDC understands that DDA can assess whether an individual's needs have changed and reduced services, we still see reductions in terminations of waiver services being instituted quite arbitrarily and without citing any legal justification in violation of Medicaid due process rights. Individuals are told their waiver services will be terminated and they can simply seek the services in the community or seek non-waiver Medicaid services without any investigation by DDS that these services are available, comparable, or meet the individual's needs. We have clients who have had their waiver services terminated, and as they move through the appeal process, the reason DDS cites for the termination changes, leading us to conclude that DDS's decision is based on budget and not the person's need. If DDS wants to save money and rely on services in the community, they must put in the time to determine if the services exist, are readily available, and meet the needs of the individual. DDS cannot claim decisions are based on need and not budget when there is no discussion with the person or research into the community options before terminating a service. DRDC understands that Council has difficult budget decisions to make this year and appreciates its longstanding support of DC residents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this testimony.
Thank you. Ricardo Thornton Sr., the co-president of Project Action. Who is joined by his lovely
Hey, Babs.
wife.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you
Okay,
and see you. Are you
this
still at
is,
the library?
I'm still at the library. Look at all these
All right.
books.
Coming to us live from MLK Library.
So, good afternoon, Madam Chair Lewis. My name is Ricardo Thornton. I am a longtime district resident in Ward 4. I'm here with my wonderful wife. Introduce yourself.
Hello.
Introduce yourself.
My name is Donna Thornton, and I'm on board. I'm on the board with my husband.
Donna's joining me, and we are lifetime district residents and live in Ward 4. We are former residents of Forest Haven Institution of the District Resident with Disabilities. I am the co-president of Project Action, Self-Advocacy, and I serve on a number of coalition boards. It means to make sure that people's rights are protected. I am working at the Martin Luther King. I work at the DC Public Library for over 48 years. Project Action motto is let our voice be heard. And I'm here to let my voice, I'm here with my wife Donna to let our voice be heard. Today I ask you to please fully fund the FY 2027 budget of the Department on Disability Services. DDS has done a great job in supporting people with disabilities and to get the services and support they need. But they need their budget to be fully funded to continue to help people. DDS needs to increase of their budget as more people with disabilities will need assistance to meet the needs of the costs in every area of our lives. People ensure that the Medicaid waiver program is fully funded, that people who receive this support can continue to get it. This is a very important for everyone, and especially for people with this Medicaid conditions. I know many self-advocates who depends on Medicaid to live independently. I am proud of Project Action, self-advocacy, and collaborating with DDS of the City Council and other DC organizations. We are committed to working together. We say that again, we are committed to working together to protect the programs and the places that makes lives better for people with disabilities. Again, thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions you may have for me or Donna at this time.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you to this panel of witnesses. Ian, I want to come back to you first. On the administrative fee, DDS started a new HCA accounting initiative in November of 2025 that I believe in your testimony you say has generated tens of thousands of hours of additional work for providers.
Yes.
DDS's testimony does not address this burden at all. Can you give the committee a concrete sense of what that work actually looks like for a provider?
Absolutely.
On a week-to-week basis, and whether any providers have told you they may not be able to sustain operations if the administrative fee is not restored?
Okay, absolutely. I'll talk to both of those points. So I know in my testimony from back in February, we actually had a specific example delineating 560 hours of work in order to complete this grid structure that each cost incurred by the provider has to be broken down by an individual This is only residential costs, right? But broken down by the individual that is receiving services. So their portion of utilities, their portion of clothing, their portion of food, their portion of household supplies needs to be on this grid that is broken down. And in many times, these checks and the payments that the providers are making are made in bulk. So they have to take this consolidated number, and prescriptions too. So they have to take this consolidated number and drill it down to each individual cost for everyone that is being supported. And that is an absolutely arduous task. We actually asked for some follow-up on this particular issue. And we had a meeting scheduled, and that topic was not addressed because the person was not present for the meeting that could address it. We asked for follow-up, and we were advised that they would consider some follow-up after these budget hearings, but that still hasn't changed the dynamic here on the amount of work that's required in order for a provider to process this documentation. And then the other half of it, the questions that I asked was, well, what were the results? Did anything change for the thousands of hours of work that was required by this particular task? Now, I recognize there's accountability. That's fine. And a submission, a reasonable submission about with respect to the individual charges, that's expected. And we can't say that we'd walk away. It's like, oh, well, here's the bill and you guys pay for it. But I think that at the end of the day, would they go out of business because of these costs? I mean, this is just another one of the unfunded mandates that exists. There's the rate for nurses, for example, is far below the actual rate that the providers have to pay. And this administrative fee, this kind of very small amount of money goes to pick up those things. Overtime, another thing that's not compensated.
By just a little bit. I'm on with the mayor. I'm on a hearing.
Ricardo, you're still on.
They're picking up your music. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay, Ricardo. So anyway, I hope that answers the question. That did I get all the points for you, Madam Chair?
Yes. I mean, what it sounds like is we're making it harder for providers. We're requiring more, and we're funding less. And I guess I don't understand the logic of that.
That why the logic from the DDS side, not from the provider side. I just want to make sure it's clear.
Not from the provider side. Yeah, no. I'm based on what you said. That's not from your side, from the agency side, which I'm curious to understand, sort of what the thought process is in doing so. I appreciate the examples you've given. It sounds like a lot on a week-to-week basis that providers are having to do.
Well, I will say, in full transparency, the one thing that we were able to negotiate in the beginning was making this, rather than a monthly submission, you can do it quarterly. But it doesn't make it any easier. It just means once a quarter, it's a hellish fiscal analysis that the providers have to construct. Many of them didn't even get it in on time because it took so long.
Yeah. On the direct support professional wage freeze, which you also touched on in your testimony, you've described a math, a 15% vacancy rate generates roughly 4% in overall organizational losses.
Yes.
Even before accounting for other funding gaps. Does the coalition have any indications of what vacancy rates could look like if the wage differential continues to narrow relative to the living wage? And at what point does that become a staffing crisis rather than staffing challenges, is what I'm wondering.
So that is an excellent question. We ran this drill back in the early 2010s. And we know that as the there used to be a bit of a margin in for the DSPs when DHCF and DDS would construct their rate models. It wasn't right on the living wage or a minimum wage line. There was at least a little bit of a buffer at the time. It's about a 20% buffer, all in. And over time, when the district made a decision that it would not continue to create that buffer, and it eroded all the way down to the point that the funding equaled the living wage. There was no margin for any tenure or quality or ability to recognize excellence. And along the way, we absolutely saw that what happened was not only was there no incentive to continue in the job, because we had a huge exodus of people in the above 20% mark, just to answer directly the question, that we needed to initiate and gain the support of this DSP Rate Payment Act. And once that happened, absolutely, things improved. Now, of course, we were occasioned with COVID at that time. But even after COVID, when we had this buffer in there, I think that we fared pretty well. So the proof was in the pudding. We have shown that there needs to be some type of a margin, and we know that it's going to erode. We can look at the pathway that was presented last night at DHCF's Medicaid meeting, going over the actual budget. And we can see that in 3 years, this is going to be a huge problem, because the rate is almost going to be, the reimbursement rate, if nothing changes, is going to be very close to the living wage, and we're going to be back at ground zero.
Thank you for that. It's very scary to think about if we continue in this current trajectory, what we're setting ourselves up for.
Yeah, I mean, we know it worked. It did. So it's as simple as that at the very least, if we could maintain this number, we feel pretty good about it. We're not even asking for the 120% or recommending the 120% that was was approved in the council last year.
Yeah. And of course, the committee is going to continue to do what we can do within the constraints that we're in. But Robin, you asked DDS to explain with some specificity how it would determine when a waiting list could be lifted. I'm going to do the same shortly. But what is currently known about DDS methodology for making that determination on lifting the waiting list? Or is this something new, or that needed to be created new?
So, I mean, there are waiting list policies and procedures, and I haven't looked at them for that question, but this came up because when we first heard that the waiting list was going to be instituted first in January and then in February, I asked the question about how during the course of the remainder of this fiscal year, we would look at whether we could add additional people into the waiver. I mean, things happen. Some number of people are going to die this year. What I was told was that they didn't anticipate being able to lift the waiting list if it was put in place at any point during this fiscal year. And it's part of what I didn't understand about the lack of calculation. So there should be, and it is, a slot is one person. So if one person gets the slot and leaves or dies or whatever, that slot isn't available. But if what we have to look at is what's happening with actual spending, you would think each quarter initially, and then each month when DDS gets the data, there could be an evaluation of whether there's room to add 1, 2, 3, however many more people onto the waiver, if there were a need for a waiting list.
Yeah. I agree. I guess I mean, I can't have you, I don't want you to speculate because I guess I'm trying to figure out what everybody thinks is the reason why we are back here again with this conversation over the waiting list.
it's really hard to determine that when you don't know what calculation
Right.
went into any of this. And that, as I've said, if we had heard that with a $1.68 million cut, there were 10 slots we couldn't fill, that wouldn't have raised
Right.
this level of
Gotcha.
concern.
Yeah.
We need to know what the basis for the calculation.
For the basis for the calculation is. Okay. Hopefully we will get that very soon. Can you, Sandy, I wanted to know, can you describe it, obviously without specifying, identifying clients, what a typical termination looks like in practice? Like what notice is given and what reason is cited and how the agency responds when someone appeals. And I guess, because I really want to really understand and see how this is playing out and how often in your experience these terminations ultimately are reversed on appeal.
We've seen it in different ways. Sometimes we have seen that no notice, no written notice is actually given. The person was just told, and so they've come to us and said, oh yeah, no, my in-home support hours was cut. Yeah, I just stopped. I used to be getting 40 hours and now I'm getting 25 hours. That just happened 6 months ago, and they didn't receive any notice whatsoever. And the reason they're coming to us now is because they're 25 hours. They've gotten written notice that it's going down to 20. So they didn't get any before, so they got nothing. But they will get a piece of paper. They have developed, DDS has developed this form where they check something off. But the form, one, it doesn't cite, it's a form, first of all. So it's hard to be specific when you've created a form. That is just something that you're checking. And one of the things they may check is no longer is appropriate. So, we're canceling, you don't need in-home supports, no longer appropriate, or fitness services, no longer appropriate. That's just checked. It doesn't indicate why. Then it will say you can go to a rec center, but it doesn't indicate in any way, first of all, in any legal justification, there's no legal cite there, there's nothing cited. And then it will tell you what your appeal rights are, that you could go to in an internal appeal or that you can go to the Office of Administrative Hearings. Then at the bottom of the form, it will say whether or not it will say, do you have, I don't have it in front of me, but it says something like, do you have rights, do you have the right to benefits pending appeal? And they can check yes or no, which is bizarre because they don't get to decide if somebody has the right to benefits pending. That should be something the Office of Administrative Hearings does. But DDS sometimes will check no, they don't have the right, which is incorrect. We've seen that happen with a client. It's very concerning because DDS clearly believes that there is a requirement under the waiver that people have to exhaust state plan services under every service, and that's not actually the case. There are some services in the regulations, for example, personal care aid services, where you do have to exhaust state plan services, but under the regulations, for example, under nutrition, it's a very different service under the state plan, and the regulations don't say you have to exhaust, which probably may be why they don't cite a legal justification. And so what has happened then, typically either we go for an internal appeal or we go to the Office of Administrative Hearings. We make decisions based on discussions with the client and our own strategy. We have been successful at most of the cases that we have handled. And they have been, the terminations have been rescinded. We do have currently one case that is in the Office of Administrative Hearings. And we did file, in one case, we filed something called summary adjudication based on notice because for a Medicaid due process, but it was settled before that. Because we do have very serious concerns. In addition to the fact that the people are having their services terminated, we do have concerns about that they are still using this form and that we do not believe that it is adequate Medicaid notice.
Yeah.
And we are still seeing from behind the scenes that some providers are being told, hey, we're going to be cutting this service. You're no longer going to get speech or fitness or nutrition through the waiver. We're going to have you, we want you to go through the state plan, and they're just telling the provider and they're not providing notice to the individual. So we do have concerns about that. And again, it may be that some services may be appropriate, but it's not done in a way that's being addressed, that it's not being done in a way that shows that DDS is looking to what the person needs and that this is available and this is comparable. It's clearly just being done to save money, under the waiver.
And is there a legal standard that requires DDS? So like, for example, I know they've been pointing towards like community services without verifying that those community services exist or are comparable. Is there a legal standard that requires DDS to do that, like verification before terminating a waiver service?
Well, for example, what is happening most often we've seen is with nutrition and fitness services. That's where they're saying, for nutrition, they're saying, instead of having, it's called nutrition consultation and evaluation. And so you have a nutritionist, and unlike what was testified from DDS at the oversight hearing, it's not just somebody who comes and develops a menu for you. It is a nutritionist, first of all, that is skilled in working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, that is training the staff, that is working with the team, with someone who has health concerns related to nutrition, does quarterly reports, and is developing menus, but is making sure they're making it individualized and not just giving you a list, hey, you have fatty liver disease, you should eat these things or not eat those things. It's not the same as if you go to the hospital and the hospital may say that, here, you're allergic to this, don't eat these things, or, you have a low iron issue, don't eat these things. And so for something like nutrition, there isn't under the regulations. If you look under the waiver regulations, it says this is what you need to qualify for nutrition services. And it doesn't say you have to go and try to use the state nutrition services first, because it's a different service.
Right.
It may be that for some people, that's fine, going to the hospital and meeting with that nutritionist. I just found out maybe I have high cholesterol. What should I do? That may work for some people. That's not what this service is.
Gotcha.
And so, yes, there are requirements, for example, like I mentioned, for personal care aid services, you do have to exhaust state plan services first. So if they were to say that, yes, you need to go through that, and then you can use waiver. But it's a different service. And fitness, again, fitness is a service that there's regulations that you have to show why you need those services. And it's not the same thing to go to the gym, because you should, for example, one of the clients that I represented who had his fitness services terminated, and I know that DDS testified, we really want to get people out in the community, and because, we don't want them isolated. My client's fitness coach was taking him to the rec center to work on his fitness there. And actually made part of his fitness training working on his social interaction skills. And so, and that's great.
Yeah.
And so, so it's not the same thing. And so DDS is not following their own regulations.
Their own internal regulations.
Yes.
And what recourse does someone have beyond just the appealing each decision individually? What other structures are in place regarding that? Or is there anything else that they can do?
I mean, right now, that's what the individual has. They
That's
can
it.
go internally and appeal it, or they can go to the Office of Administrative Hearings.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
Ricardo, are you still here?
I'm still here, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, as far as DDS services go, how have you experienced some of the your job placement? I don't know if you have fitness or nutrition. What are some of the services that you benefit from that you want to make sure all individuals are able to also benefit from?
What we have right now, we have residential services, where we have the walk-in supervision. It's called pop-up, and that's to make sure that that we have plenty of food in our refrigerators, and that Donna is okay and I'm okay, and there's no what's going on, right, honey?
No.
We kind of like some of those services.
Okay, good. And are there any services that you want to make sure that you all receive, that everybody else is able to receive, that you think would benefit?
I think drop-in supervision is a good thing.
Okay.
I think that making sure that the people that they're working with listen to them and not get make a suggestion over, give them a chance to say what it is that they like.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's missing. I don't think we're communicating more. I think we're more on that this is what we want to do, this is what we're going to do. But
Mm-hmm.
we need to make sure that we are giving our voices are heard. And
Absolutely.
sometimes that's not always so.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all being here. Donna,
Uh,
did you have anything you wanted to add?
Did you want to say anything, Donna?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right.
Welcome.
Madam Chair, I forwarded the graphic over to Mr. Wyman, so you'd have some documentation on that trend line.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right. To this panel, is anyone wants to add before we end this panel? No?
I just want to say, Madam Chair, thank you so much for coming out to the Better Together reception.
Oh.
I was really surprised to see council members there. This was a very good organization, and you coming out made a big difference. So thank you so much for that time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. And thank you for all your advocacy always.
No problem, Matt.
I actually would like to add one thing. I think we're very, as we move into this difficult budget period, I think we need to, in addition to the emphasis on due process, recognize that we are fortunate in DC to have monitoring functions from two organizations, both Disability Rights DC and Quality Trust, and making sure that those are respected and unimpeded and supported is going to be really important, as is the transparency and specificity and openness that we're talking about. This is going to be a difficult time, and we should, we're lawyers, we should play by these rules and respect them and let them do the good that they can.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for all your testimonies. Thank you to this panel of witnesses as well. I want to remind people that the deadline to submit written testimony is at 5 p.m. on Thursday, May 7th. We will take a short break for our captioners while we transition to government witnesses. Before we begin, I just want to reflag for the speakers to be mindful of their space of speaking, especially while reading, for the sake of our interpreters and captioners. We will now turn to government witnesses. We will now turn to our government witnesses. Here with us today is Andrew Reese, our Director of the Department of Disability Services, better known as DDS, and Anthony Young, our Agency Fiscal Officer and Officer of the Chief Financial Officer. Thank you all for being here today. As you know, it is our custom to administer an oath before you begin. So if you all could just raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give the Committee on Facilities is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Thank you, Director Reese. You may begin your testimony.
Thank you.
And be mindful of the speed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis George. Good morning, good afternoon. Councilmember Lewis George, members and staff of the Committee on Facilities. I am Andrew Reese, the Director of the Department on Disability Services, DDS. With me today, as you said, is Anthony Young, the DDS Agency Fiscal Officer. The mission of DDS is to provide innovative, high-quality services and supports that enable people with disabilities to lead meaningful and productive lives as vital members of their families, schools, workplaces, and communities in every neighborhood in the District of Columbia. On behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser, I am pleased to provide testimony today on the Mayor's fiscal year 2027 proposed budget and fiscal plan. On April 10, 2026, Mayor Bowser presented her proposed Grow DC budget and financial plan for FY27. This budget includes important investments in transformational growth, right-sizing of spending, and investments in shared priorities, including public schools, public safety, and affordable housing. The budget also reflects the Mayor's commitment to continued support of people with disabilities in DC. While recognizing Medicaid as a major cost driver for the district in FY27, Mayor Bowser's budget proposed a 3% local funds increase for fiscal year. This $5.1 million increase in local funds is provided primarily to support wages for direct support professionals and to meet the projected Medicaid waiver growth in the intellectual and developmental disabilities, the IDD waiver, and the individual and family support IFS waiver. The Mayor's proposed FY27 total budget for DDS is $230.6 million, which is a little less than a 1% increase from last year's approved budget of $229 million. This includes a 3% increase in local funds from $162.5 million in FY26 to $167.6 million in FY27. The proposed budget also includes $34.8 million in federal grant funds, $17.7 million in anticipated Medicaid payments, and $8.7 million in special purpose revenue. The proposed FY27 budget funds 435.5 FTEs. Our proposed FTEs include 121.93 FTEs within agency management, 149 FTEs in the Developmental Disabilities Administration, 90.64 FTEs in the Rehabilitation Services Administration, 62 FTEs within the Disability Determination Division, DDD. We also fund 12 financial operations positions within the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. There have been no substantive staffing changes within our administrations, and no restructuring has taken place within the agency. The agency currently has 58 vacancies. Of these 58 vacancies, 30 positions are 100% federally funded vacancies, and of that 30, 22 are DDD vacancies on hold pending Social Security Administration approval. 6 are in the recruitment process, and 2 are on hold for vacancy savings. 16 positions are 80% federally funded. 3 of these are on hold for vacancy savings, and 13 are in the recruitment process. 10 positions are locally funded positions in multiple areas of the agency, of which 6 positions are on hold for vacancy savings, 3 are in the recruitment process, and 1 is occupied by a temporary promotion. The two remaining vacancies are OCFO positions that are on hold for vacancy savings. In last year's budget oversight testimony, I talked about the sustainability of DDS services and the fact that sustainability looks different across administrations within DDS. For the Developmental Disabilities Administration, DDA, sustainability means working toward cost containment within our two waivers. For the Rehabilitation Services Administration, RSA, sustainability has meant reviewing provider rates that had remained essentially unchanged over the last 10 years. For the past 6 months, DDS has been meeting with stakeholders to address challenges of sustainability. These work groups have generated reports outlining recommendations. On the DDA side, the work group aimed to identify key cost drivers within the IDD waiver, evaluate alignment between assessed need and authorized services, and explore cost-effective service delivery models. Recommendations include revisiting supported living house rates. A house rate means that everyone residing in a supported living setting is supported, or in many cases over-supported, by a rate consistent with the highest staffing level of the person residing in the home. The Sustainability Work Group recommended revising supported living rate structures to align with individual staffing and support needs in place of house rates. Another recommendation made by the work group is to better align services with a person's assessed needs. To this end, the work group recommended next steps, including training related to the accurate and consistent assessment of support needs and robust internal controls related to the review and approval of services. Finally, the work group recommended the expanded use of assistive technology and innovative service delivery methods like remote supports. To this end, a pilot was initiated using American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds, to address the challenge of the initial cost of provider-side infrastructure and startup capacity, such as consultation and training, provider-side equipment and supplies, and remote support platforms and software. In providing the one-time funding for these initial costs, DDS is hoping to jumpstart remote supports, making this option more widely available to interested waiver participants. The RSA PCO Sustainability Work Group identified urgent concerns regarding provider rates. To address these concerns, DDS approved an interim rate increase to the current rate structure effective March 1, 2026. This action provides near-term financial relief to providers. Additionally, RSA awarded a consultant contract for a rate study, allowing us to move toward a more performance-based rate structure that will incentivize successful employment outcomes. The proposed FY27 budget for DDA is $173 million, approximately. This represents an increase of 1% from the FY26 approved budget of $170.9 million. It continues to fully fund all services for people currently supported by DDA. DDA's proposed budget includes $152.5 million in local funds, $8.7 million in special purpose revenue, and $11.7 million in Medicaid payments. DDA operates 2 Medicaid home and community-based services, HCBS waivers. The IDD HCBS waiver for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities provides 23 services and supports for more than 1,900 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities in their own homes and in integrated community-based settings. DDA also operates the Individual and Family Supports, or IFS, HCBS waiver, which focuses on people who do not require residential supports and can leverage support from family or friends to meet their needs. The IFS HCBS waiver includes 19 services and supports over 100 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The IDD and IFS HCBS waivers comprise 73% of DDS's local budget to cover the district's share of the cost of these waiver services. In FY27, that local share is projected to be $126 million for the 2 waivers. The FY27 budget was developed based upon an assumption that DDS would implement a waiting list for the IDD waiver. At this time, IDD enrollment does remain open. However, the waiver growth calculated in FY27's budget projections included only the expected cost of living increases in the waiver that occur each July, and any admissions to the waiver of people into slots that are reserved for youth transitioning from CFSA and for people who transition from ICF care. However, DDA has been making progress in managing costs in the IDD waiver through ongoing efforts to better tailor services to the assessed needs of each person supported and ensure those services are provided in the most integrated and least restrictive setting. In addition, we will be seeking a waiver amendment in January 2027, seeking to implement some of the changes recommended by the DDA Sustainability Working Group. Our ability to continue enrolling new waiver applicants into the IDD waiver is based on the projected availability of funds. The waiver projections are made in coordination with DHC, the Department of Healthcare Finance, and OCFO, and this will determine when DDA implements and admits people from a waiting list for the IDD waiver. The Direct Support Professional Payment Rate Act of 2022 requires the district to support raising the direct support professional's average wage to 117.6% of the living wage. The FY27 budget includes an additional $4.5 million to fully fund the wage enhancement at the current level. This initiative was initially funded with ARPA Section 9817 funds beginning in 2023. In FY26, this was funded mostly with local funds, that is 75% local and 25% ARPA, and it will be fully funded with local funds beginning in FY27. However, it will be funded at 117.6 of the living wage in effect this fiscal year. At this time, there are no plans to increase the wage in FY26 or 27. In FY27, DDS's residential costs are budgeted at approximately $27.2 million. This is an increase of 4%. In fiscal year 2026, DDS reduced administrative fees payable under the human care agreements that reimburse provider occupancy and other residential supports. This funding was partially restored by council in a one-time enhancement. This enhancement was not annualized, and providers will see the reduction to administrative fees again in the FY27 budget. DDA supports 1,091 people in waiver-funded residential settings. Of those, currently 111, or 10%, reside in a host home. 81, or 7.4%, are in residential habilitation placements. And 899, or 82.4%, are in supported living placements. Residential supports are funded using 3 distinct revenue streams. The first is special purpose revenue. This takes the form of contribution to cost each person makes, often using their own Social Security SSI or SSDI benefit. In the FY27 proposed budget, special purpose revenue accounts for approximately $8.7 million for residential supports. Special purpose revenue, however, is only sufficient to pay for a portion of residential costs. The maximum monthly SSI payment is currently $994 a month. $835.94 of this is contributed to fund residential supports. The second funding source is Medicaid earnings from indirect cost recovery and administrative claiming. This accounts for approximately 25% of the residential supports, or about $7.6 million. The remaining $11 million is covered by local funds. RSA's proposed FY27 budget is $21.9 million. This is a 1% decrease from its approved FY26 budget of $22,123,448. RSA provides supports that are 78.7% federally funded with a 21.3% local share. In addition, the grant includes a maintenance of effort requirement. This requires that local funding must maintain the local funds expended during the last closed out fiscal year. So that for FY27, this means we must maintain local spending at the amount expended in FY25. The supports provided by RSA include vocational rehabilitation services, supported employment, independent living services, independent living older blind services. RSA's budget also includes the Assistive Technology Grant, which is currently a pass-through to the district's Assistive Technology Center at Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. Federal grants account for $15.6 million of the RSA budget, and local funds account for approximately $4.8 million. The federal grant decreased by $2.3 million because we did not meet the maintenance of effort requirement in 2023. Looking ahead, we expect additional penalties for not meeting the maintenance of effort requirements in FY24 and 25. The impact of these penalties, however, will be offset by a cost of living increase to the VR grant that was implemented by the Department of Education in April 2025. RSA's budget also anticipates that the administration will receive approximately $1.6 million in special purpose revenue collected through commission payments from vending machine income in all federal and district buildings, which is paid directly to the individual Randolph-Shepherd vendors or as quarterly pension payment to all eligible vendors. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act of 2014, WIOA, included a requirement that 15% of the federal vocational rehabilitation grant must be reserved for funding pre-employment transition services, pre-ETS, for eligible and potentially eligible students under the age of 22. Under pre-ETS, there are 5 required pre-employment activities, which include job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on opportunities for enrollment in comprehensive transition or post-secondary educational programs at institutions of higher education, workplace readiness training to develop skills and independent living, and instructions in self-advocacy, which may include peer mentoring. The requirement to reserve 15% of the federal grant for pre-ETS, along with the maintenance of effort requirement for local funds, has created a budget pressure for RSA. However, the proposed budget is sufficient to meet the needs of everyone supported by RSA in FY27. DDS is also the host agency for DDD, the district office at which Social Security Administration reviews and determines Social Security disability, the medical portion of disability claims. This operation is 100% federally funded with a proposed budget of $11.8 million. This budget is an estimate based on likely workload. Still, there's a mechanism allowing for an increase in federal funds in the event that DDD needs additional funding. At the start of FY24, the Social Security Administration imposed a strict hiring, actually start of calendar year 24, I'm sorry. The Social Security Administration imposed a strict hiring freeze impacting DDD's ability to fill vacancies. This hiring freeze has been lifted, and DDS will begin actively recruiting to fill 3 vacancies within DDD. I'd like to thank you very much, Chairperson Lewis George, for the opportunity to share our vision for FY27. We at DDS appreciate your thoughtful engagement and partnership. I also want to thank DDS staff and providers. Their resilience, skill, and compassion continue to drive our mission of full inclusion for people with disabilities. I'd like to offer a special thanks also to the stakeholders who engaged in the PCO sustainability work groups over the last 6 months, enriching the discussion with their experience and perspectives. I would also like to recognize the community of self-advocates, family members, and other partners who challenge us to deliver on the promise of our mission now and in the future. We at DDS know that we are never alone in pursuing our mission, and there's no more authentic form of support than honest, thoughtful feedback that our stakeholders continue to provide. Finally, I would like to thank Mayor Bowser. The budget before this committee represents an ongoing commitment to ensuring the full inclusion of people with disabilities on the part of the mayor. That commitment, in tandem with the commitment that defines our staff and provider communities, is part of why people with disabilities are and will continue to be integral participants in the district's growth. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Director. I want to start with DDS fiscal year 26 budget. The mayor reduced the developmental disability services budget by $310,000 in the supplemental budget. First, this budget includes the local funding for waiver services. Is that correct?
No. Reduction was taken. These were contract related. They weren't waiver reductions.
Okay, so this reduction didn't come from waiver services.
No, it did not.
Okay. Where was there, I want to turn to now the fiscal year 27 budget. This is the first time since 2022 that non-union DDS employees will receive a cost of living adjustment. Is that correct?
No, they are still not receiving a cost of living adjustment.
Wow.
Non-union employees for the district have not received an adjustment since the fall of 2022.
About how many non-union employees work at DDS?
It's a small and decreasing number. We have had over the last year some expansion in the number of people who have been able to join the union. I would have to get back to you on the specific number.
Okay.
But it does include just limited staff. It's all managers, first of all. So I want
It's
to
all
be clear
managers.
about that.
Okay.
All the people who are reporting to me and down that chain, as well as then many administrative staff support and our HR staff.
Okay. And are any non-union positions considered hard to fill positions?
We don't currently have any positions that we consider hard to fill.
Okay. Does DDS expect the lack of COLA to either contribute to higher than expected attrition of existing employees or make vacancies for non-union positions more difficult to fill?
Fortunately, that has not been the case thus far.
Okay. The mayor's proposed budget also reduced funding and added limitations to the district's paid family leave program. How many DDS employees use paid family leave in fiscal year 25 and 26 so far, if you know?
I don't know. I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay. And my concern is between the lack of raises with due to rising inflation is really a pay cut, right? And changes to paid family leave. And DDS, and I'm just wondering, is DDS concerned about employees leaving DDS or district government with wholesale changes being made regarding COLAs and paid family leave that many of your employees benefit from, but they benefit from because they work for it?
As I said, to date, fortunately, we have not seen that. And so
Okay. What in DDS's fiscal year 27 budget is there to support your more than 400 employees in light of these new challenges that will exist as a result of COLA freezes and lack of paid family leave, current paid family leave benefits at the current benefit they receive it?
So we do, our HR, I guess the only thing I could say is that our HR has regular support for staff. We have Wellness Wednesdays. We have a lot of things that support the staff in being able to sort of deal with the stress of doing the job that they're doing, because the job that many of our staff do is extremely stressful.
Yeah,
so
that's
we
right.
support them in that way. You know, there is little we can do in terms of giving people pay increases. We have been able to have, we have some positions that are career ladder positions. So where possible, we have been able to
do that.
do the career ladders for people.
Okay. And regarding your union employees, DDS has a collective bargain agreements with 4 unions, each with a working edition CBA and a compensation CBA. Only one union, I think it's AFG 1403, has both CBAs current, which expire at the end of the year. Both CBAs for each of the other 3 unions are expired but remain in effect. Of the 6 expired CBAs, only 2 of them are in progress, and the rest do not have negotiations pending, including for one that expired, I think, in 1995, and the other that expired in 2010. The compensation CBAs separately, I think, cover 149 for 105 and 13 employees, but the chart seems to indicate, but the chart in pre-hearing responses seem to indicate no employees are covered under the working conditions CBAs.
Correct. I have to assume it's correct because that's how we
Okay.
answered.
And is that why none of them have negotiations pending?
OLRCB could respond better to that. I
Okay.
know that one of our largest is related to compensation groups 1 and 2, and there are discussions ongoing, but I don't know what the correct
okay.
part of
Okay.
of what the status of those discussions are.
Okay. If you could get back to me on whether negotiations have been attempted and why an agreement hasn't been reached or renewed for the working conditions CBAs for, I believe it's DCNA, ASME 2401, and AFG 383.
Yes.
Okay. I was happy to learn the Social Security Administration approved hiring for 3 examiner positions. In your testimony, you mentioned of the 30 vacancies that are 100% federally funded, 22 are on hold pending approval, and 6 are in recruitment, and 2 are on hold for vacancy savings. Once the positions in recruitment are filled, what is the vacancy rate within DDD, and how does that compare to fiscal year 25?
So they're only allowing us to fill 3 within DDD. So we still have a challenge of vacancies within DDD, and it is totally dependent on the Social Security Administration when they will allow us to fill those. And they are fully federally funded. And so as soon as they give us the go-ahead, we move forward.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the district pay scale is better than many other parts of the country. Although we perform a federal function, we pay the district wage, so the recruitment should not be that challenging.
Okay, so we are really it's really pending on what the Social Security Administration does, and
yes.
Okay. All right. Now I want to turn to DDA, starting with the waiting list. I'm surprised the fiscal year 27 IDD and IFS waiver protections were created based on the assumption that DDS would implement of a waiting list. I'll get to DDA expectations that no one will be placed on the waiting list, but now I want to focus on, I think, the projections. How many slots are funded in fiscal year 27 for the IDD and IFS waivers?
So I have attempted to explain this, and apparently poorly, several times. Slots are not funded. And when you look at, for example, the Appendix J of our waiver, which when we're developing our waiver, we publish so everyone can see it. It's 12 pages long in projecting, and it's 18 lines per page. In projecting waiver expenditures, what they look at is the projected number of people that will be served on each service line and the projected utilization of each of those people over the course of a year. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the Appendix J and you look at the waiver slots, the waiver slots are used on the Appendix J to project what's called cost neutrality. The cost of the waiver per person cannot exceed the cost of a person being in intermediate care facilities. So that the current average cost per person in our IDD waiver is $162,000. $165. And I'm sorry, that's from last fiscal year, but we track that by tracking total waiver expenditures divided by number of slots used. When we're looking at
Wait, slow down, say that
Oh,
again.
sorry,
Sorry.
total.
For me and for the captioners. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was doing so well before. I was watching. So it's total expenditures divided by total number of unique slots utilized.
Okay.
And that gives you the average cost, which has to be tracked throughout the year. DHCF is tracking this to make sure that our waiver remains cost neutral. In projecting whether we have adequate funds to serve all eligible people, we look at those 12 pages. It's about 200 lines of individual services in the Appendix J, and we're tracking regularly utilization of each. We first project what will be needed based on prior year's utilization, and then track utilization throughout the year. To be clear, my recollection of what I said, and it's recorded and posted online and in our forum, is that we did project that there would be a waiting list in place beginning October 1. Because there was a waiting list planned at the time that we were developing the budget projections for our waiver. Not only were we developing our FY27 budget, but we were also developing our Appendix J to our waiver, which, as we also indicated, we will be submitting a waiver amendment that we hope to go into effect January 2027. But the one that was done at that time, the Appendix J that was completed last fall, was done with an expectation that a waiting list was in place. And so we looked at projected needs based on the number of people that would be served based on that waiting list being in place. And what I indicated last week, and I expect will be the case, is that a waiting list will be in effect in October. My hope, which is what I said then, is that it will be more of a pause in services than a list that exists for any long period of time. The most reasonable expectation is that when we do our first quarter FRP, we will then evaluate, along with DHCF and OCFO, the available funds for the full fiscal year to be able to, I expect at that time, eliminate the waiting list, because not only will we have, our hope is, the amendments to our waiver, we also have the cost savings that we have been seeing this year from some of the adjustments that we've been making in terms of service coordinators being more mindful when people move, of focusing on not just what we traditionally focused on was kind of compatibility. Who might they fit with well? We're also taking into account what are the service level needs of the person in the home and this person, because the way that our waiver currently reads, the highest service needs person in the home is the level that we pay everyone in the home. And so if you bring someone in who has a staffing ratio need that's lower, but they're in a home with someone who needs one-on-one staffing, you have to provide one-on-one staffing for both people. We plan to address that in our waiver amendment, and they have been addressing trying to better, just practically speaking, as they plan for people to move, aligning people better. We're seeing good outcomes. One of the things I know from tracking the waiver over the last 10 years is that you have to look at more than just a month or two of data, because for one, providers have 365 days to submit a claim. So you do have to pay attention to utilization and claims over time, not just suddenly either get very concerned or very happy.
Okay.
My first year I went through that, and I haven't since.
Okay. Thank you for that. I want to unpack that just a little. So if I understand this, the projections, was it only because there was a waiting list in effect at the time? Like the projections were created under the assumption there would be a waiting list, and it's only because there was a waiting list in effect at that time that You all did that?
Even though there wasn't a waiting list, yes.
Okay.
Just to contribute to the difficulty of it. There was a waiting list that was projected, and there was concern about, given that because of the ARPA maintenance of effort requirement, we could not implement the waiting list. There was concern about whether that would create spending pressure in our waiver,
Okay.
which we are not seeing so far, fortunately.
Did
But yes, we developed it based on the assumptions that were in place at that time.
at that time?
And if you look actually in our, I think it's in our Form 5, where it talks about changes to the budget, there's the $5 million increase. And what it says is to fund existing service levels or something like this, which is essentially saying everything that's currently in place is going to cost $5 million more. And unfortunately, what was currently in place at that time was a waiting list. And so funding existing services meant the increases so that we could absorb the cost of the last quarter of the cost of the DSP wage, plus the cost of living increase. Although we are not increasing wages in the waiver, there are cost of living increases to other costs within the waiver.
Okay, so does that mean it's DDS's position that it was required to assume the existence of a waiting list to create the waiver services budget for fiscal year 27?
Correct.
Okay.
We did, however, as I've said, we worked with this PCO working group. The service coordination folks have been working hard on identifying ways to provide services in a more cost-effective manner. And our hope is that by the first quarter FRP, we will be in a much better place. And what we'll see by the end of the first quarter, that we will be in a much better place. My agency fiscal officer is not as, he likes there to be more data than I'm. So sometime in the first 6 months of the year, but my thought is that we will see within the first quarter that we have been making savings and can begin to ease up on that,
Okay.
if not completely eliminate.
All right. I appreciate that, fiscal officer. So that's your job. How did the consideration of a waiting list affect the projections? Basically, would waiver cost have increased if a waiting list was not factored into the projections?
As I said, you go through 200 lines, and what they had to do is that they project out the 5 years of the waiver, and they identify the increase or decrease of each service line based on the anticipated number of people coming in. And so if you were to say, well, what would it be if you didn't have the waiting list? It means someone going back and evaluating all 200 lines and making those adjustments. I think that reasonably, given all of the changes that we have been making and the good work that we did with the PCO sustainability work group, that we should be able to live within the budget that we have, while it may mean a pause at the beginning of the fiscal year with a brief waiting list, that we should be in a good position to move forward and eliminate that waiting list after that 1 or 2 quarters.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Would the waiting list assumption have been made if the council did not make the 1.4% reduction to waiver services in fiscal year 26?
No, because as I said, if you look at Form 5, we would have included in our budget the cost to continue existing service levels.
How much money would be needed to fund waiver services without the existence of a waiting list?
As I said, that projection, it's already loaded into our Appendix J, and that would require redoing the whole Appendix J, which we will do when we submit the amendment that's due in January. And it's not just a matter of, is it this dollar amount? And I hear people with the frustration of, well, exactly how many slots do you have and how much per slot? We don't fund individual slots. We don't know when a person is coming in for services, whether that's a person who's going to require $75,000 a year or $750,000 a year. And so the projection is extremely challenging. And at this time, it's not funded at that level. And what
is that new? Because
no,
we don't fund individual slots. To me, is new because that's how you all used to do it. Am I not right about that?
No, our waiver has always said that availability of slots and funding. So we have to have slots
Uh-huh.
because we cannot place more people in waiver services than we have slots, and we have to have available funding. We clearly don't have an issue with slots, but we do have an issue with available funding.
Right.
We did previously have, in 2017, we bumped up against the slot issue. And it was a simple, less than 1 week waiver amendment. DHCF reached out to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, indicated that we were coming to the total number of slots allocated for the year, and said that we needed to bump that up for the year and that we had the resources to pay for it. And we got an immediate yes. So the number of slots, as I said, is really a function of calculating the cost neutrality in the waiver more than it's an issue of, you don't fund an individual slot. You provide the services of each person that comes in based on their needs.
The reason why this answer isn't sufficient for me is because as facilities chair and now tasked with allocating the budget to meet the needs of the community, if you tell me that we don't fund individual slots, then what can I look to if I want to ensure that there isn't a waiting list in my purview as the legislative branch who is now in charge with allocating the budget, which is my function, is to allocate the budget? How am I able to allocate the budget
You
to
can
meet the
look at
need of our community?
You can look at the Appendix J that we have published.
Okay.
You can look at prior year Appendix Js. You can compare. You can see how much it went up. I mean, it's like I say, it is a complex calculation because it is literally more than 200 lines of services and making an assessment of.
If it's complex for you all who are, I mean, let me be, you are the expert. If it's complex for you, my budget office, it's going to be even more complex for them. With me trying to explain it to them and me and Sebastian having to deal with the rest of this bigger budget. So I'm asking you to make it easier for me to do what my job is right now, which is eliminate the need for a waiting list by funding what that funding need is. And I don't want to add 1.7 million or more, and then DDS says that's not enough to get rid of the waiting list. So in order for me to budget smart, right, like you all do, I do need an answer here that would allow me to do that.
I don't even know, and it's possible I would have to consult with DHCF. It's possible that we would need to do an amendment to our waiver in order to do that, because we would be amending the Appendix J. And we're doing an amendment, but that amendment is, our plan is to do an amendment that will go into effect January of 2027. Our current Appendix J anticipates that a waiting list is in place. And we get quarterly from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services a whole list of those 200 lines, what we projected and what we actually utilized and spent. And anything that is 10% higher or lower, we have to provide a justification. And in the same way, if the overall is 10% would be a huge amount over or under, given that our current waiver is at about $400 million. But it is, I do believe, and I could get back to you on this, I do believe that that would require a waiver amendment. It's not simply something that we could do, because it is in our current Appendix J. So we would have to update the Appendix J and submit that to CMS.
If DDS keeps its waiting list, how and how often will DDA assess whether an individual can be offered a spot off the waiting list?
As I said, what we will look at, well, I'm not looking next to me right now, is our first quarter FRP. Our assessment thus far in the year is that we have been achieving good savings, and we will know by the first quarter FRP, not only whether we have been successful in achieving those savings, we will also know whether CMS has approved an amended waiver, which would be amending to eliminate the waiting list and would be implementing some of the changes that have been recommended by the DDA Sustainability Work Group.
Okay. What is your response to concerns that DDS's deviation from the previous established policy that each slot could be filled by an eligible individual makes the waiver slot numbers meaningless?
That people have simply not understood what the waiver slot numbers meant. I have attempted, as I said, poorly perhaps, to explain it in a number of our meetings. We finally moved on from it because it appeared then, as it appears today, that I haven't been able to explain that we look at the overall budget, we look at all services and all people being served, not individual slots.
How does DDS plan then to determine when there is adequate funding to lift any waiting list imposed in the future?
We get both a quarterly FRP, but they also do monthly updates to that FRP. At the first quarterly FRP, we will have I think a very good sense of where we stand in terms of the waiver.
When is that first quarterly FRP?
January 2027. Which means that we would, as I said, have a pause from October to January of just the IDD waiver. The IFS waiver would continue admitting people. We could continue providing in-home supports to people. We could continue providing up to $75,000 worth of services to those people. We have reserved spaces in our waiver, anticipating for the number of people from CFSA, the youth from CFSA who may need these services and would be transitioning. And so those would be available as well.
Okay, so the potential is 90 to maybe 120 days of a gap for
correct
individuals.
Yes.
If the waiting list is now in the amended waiver and projections are based on the amended waiver, when do we get out of having a waiting list? Will we be in this same position, say in fiscal year 28?
No. So as I said, we anticipate amending the waiver. My hope is that it would be in effect January 2027. And so we would be publishing the revised Appendix J in the fall as part of the public comment period. And our expectation is that our expectation and hope is that that would be done without a waiting list because we are making substantial change. We're making real progress in making some changes that we think will ensure that we can live within our current means.
If you all can amend the waiver to remove the waiting list in the fall for January 2027, then why can't you all just do it now for fiscal year 27?
We submitted our amendment for we're actually still waiting on CMS to approve our most recent amendment to the waiver that we started working on last spring.
Okay. If I'm able to find the money, I want to get rid of the waiting list. I mean, I think you understand that. Even if it exists only on paper due to cost saving efforts. But again, I do not want to add money just for the waiver waiting list to continue.
And as I said, when we get to the amendment to the waiver in January, and as we're able to fully evaluate the cost savings from the changes that service coordination has been making, we'll be in a good place in January of 2027 to say that the current funds are sufficient to eliminate the waiting list. We can't do it prior to then because we've got to, for one, go through this process of amending our Appendix J to ensure that we're accurately reflecting both the changes that we'll be making, the basis for those changes, the basis for us saying that we believe we can serve this many people because the level of service to some may be reduced based on paying more attention to this issue of house rates, paying more attention to number of hours that people receive of service and those kinds of things.
If I add money and there is still a waiting list, will DDA reduce the cost saving measures it intends to implement?
No. So the cost savings measures that we're implementing, when we had discussions about them, they were, so I remember one of the first things we started with had to do with doing an exercise where we presented a hypothetical person.
Mhm.
We actually took all the identifying information out. It was a real case, and asked providers, can you give us your estimate of what level services this person would need based on what you're reading here? And one of the things that came up was, well, just in case. This person is going to need 16 hours a day of periodic supported living just in case. I'm concerned about these issues. And when we looked at this, when we looked at it and looked at it together, what we were able to develop was a sort of matrix of people who have a level of need here and overall needs that identify these specific needs. There'd be an expectation that they would be funded at this level. Going beyond that would require some kind of additional approval. That not only is about saving money, it's also having someone in your home 16 hours a day is an intrusion, unless you need that person in your home 16 hours a day. We heard wonderful testimony at the performance hearing from a parent who talked about how important services were to allowing her child to become more independent, to be able to communicate. But we also have to make sure on the other side that we're not over supporting people, that we're not providing so much support to people that they're not learning to live more independently, and that they're having people there more hours than what they need. To that end, in part, we have the remote support pilot, and that's going to be expanded, we hope, to more than 100 people. And we will see how those people are faring with having technology and remote supports so that they are able to live more independently and get just the services and the visits into their home that they need, while they are then able to get the support they need and able to connect to people in the community the way the rest of us would.
So this isn't so this isn't a matter of funding. It is a decision of, it's more of a policy posture. So are you saying DDS doesn't need or want me to add money to the IDD waiver? Because if I do add money, I'm not sure what, if anything, would be able to be paid for that wouldn't be paid for in the current proposed budget.
Exactly, because in the course of the year, while it is true that we will have a waiting list on October 1, it will not be in place for that long. And we believe that with making these changes, we will be able to live within the budget that exists now. And so adding money to that is going to help prevent a pause when we really are able to make necessary changes. And I think it's essential to make some of these changes. And I recognize people brought up, sometimes an individual service is terminated abruptly without necessary planning for it, because this is new for all of us. It shouldn't be. In 2014, we had the settings rule that requires us to provide services in the community in the least restrictive setting. I think some of our advocates happen to believe that the more services you get, the better served you are. I don't agree with that. I think that services are intended to help you live your life as independently as possible. And as I said, last time we heard from someone who needed a lot of services to be independent and to access their environment. But many people need services in order to transition into their environment. And we need to do a better job of helping people do that.
Is there a cost savings estimate that you all have for the changes that you believe will result in that? Do you all have an estimate of cost savings?
We haven't done that yet because we would do it as part of the amendment process. So we work with the analysts at DHCF who prepare the Appendix J.
Got you. You mentioned revising the supported living rate structures. Can you elaborate on why the working group identified this as a cost saving measure?
Well, as I said, we have this one issue in supported living where we have what's called house rates. And we didn't always have that in the waiver.
Okay.
It got added because adding individual services, I don't know the whole reason it got added. It's before my time.
Okay.
But what house rates do essentially is that services to everyone in the home are provided at the staffing level of the highest needs person. And the reason for that is, for example, if you have a person in a two-person home who needs one-to-one staff,
like you were saying.
you can't provide 1 to 2 staff to the other person because of house rates. Now,
Because of how.
what we don't include and plan to include in the waiver is that you could explore technology, you could explore remote supports, you could explore supported living periodic for that other person. The thing is, it was based on an expectation of having to do a staffing ratio for each person in the home. So like 1 to 1, 1 to 2, as opposed to having more flexible services available, which we have been implementing, and we hope through our pilot project, we're going to see success with.
How long does DDA expect completing revising these rate structures to take?
We expect they would be in place January 2027.
January 2027. And how is DDA going to ensure revisiting supported living rate structures will not adversely affect supported persons, including by avoiding cutting staffing levels that are actually necessary?
I mean, part of our waiver amendment process is a very robust public process where we explain what the changes are. We take people's feedback and make any necessary changes based on that feedback.
Okay. The working group also recommending, I guess, aligning services with a person's assessed needs. Again, why was this identified as an area that could create cost-saving measures? I know you mentioned aligning services would be achieved through training or accurate and consistent assessment of supports needs and robust internal controls related to the review and approval of services. I guess, can you provide examples of how these trainings and internal controls are still going to basically guarantee that a person receives all the services and supports they need and are not just need, but are entitled to?
So keeping in mind that, and we heard from them today, we have a pretty robust system of quality oversight. Within the Department on Disability Services, we have monitoring that's done by service coordination, and then we have monitoring done by our Quality Assurance and Performance Management Administration. During the Evans litigation, the Quality Trust for People with Disabilities was created, and they do ongoing monitoring of the work done by DDS. And I meet monthly with the director of Quality Trust. So to the extent they're identifying problems, they immediately call service coordination, but then we also talk about those in our monthly meeting. And we also have the Protection and Advocacy Center, the Disability Rights DC, which, you know, as we know, will be watching over whatever we're doing.
I agree with you. We do have a strong monitoring system. I just rather a person's supports and services are not cut in the first place rather than needing to go to Quality Trust or Disability Rights DC to get the services that they need.
Can I provide some context for that? Just that I know that we heard a lot of testimony about some very concerning reductions. Of the 2,000 people in the two waivers, 1,900 in the IDD, 100 people in the IFS waiver, we've had 14 level 1 appeals within the agency. 7 of those were approved. So that's a first level appeal. You're talking to the supervisor trying to work it out. 7 of those were denied, and 1 of those that got denied went to a level 2 appeal. We've had only 3 cases at OAH. I know we heard a lot about the concerns about whether we're respecting rights. 3 cases out of 2,000 people served. And I'm not saying that those 3 people didn't, if they deserve to have it, we should have done it. And I'm as concerned about each of those individual people, but I also want to make sure that it's in proper context.
My question then, do you think that every person who had services terminated, I guess I don't know that every person who had services terminated actually appealed, so I can't, I hear you, I just can't, that can't be the only litmus test that I utilize to do the oversight.
So you
work that
asked
I-
us at the last hearing about terminated services, and in FY25, for example, fitness, we had 24 people
Oh,
whose
it's just the
services
fitness, great.
were terminated. Of those 24, 4 of them were because it wasn't really a termination. The person or the guardian requested a change of provider. 4 of them, the person or the guardian said they wanted to terminate the service. 1 of them transitioned to institutional care.
Mm.
1 was an error and was returned. It was an administrative error. It wasn't actually terminated. 1 assessment didn't recommend ongoing or clinical necessity. And 4 transitioned to non-waiver supports in the community, which included a supported living provider that had fitness goals and used recreational activities in the community, an exercise group at the National Rehabilitation Hospital, a supported living provider that also was bringing people into the community and had started, and that would be the idea. You have a fitness provider teaching, and then the provider picks it up. And the other was a person who began visiting the Iona Senior Day program. So even though they terminated, we do transition people appropriately. And I understand that sometimes that doesn't happen. And when it doesn't happen in that manner, we work to correct it.
A lot of conversation. Is DDS's position that nutrition services must be exhausted under the state plan before individuals can enroll in them under the waiver?
I think I would say that all services, you should make sure we have this integrated support star. You go through an assessment before you provide any service in the waiver of first exploring whether there are natural supports. And then there are Medicaid provided nutrition services. And if what is provided there does not meet the person's need, then they would go to the waiver. In the same way, we have dental services that are paid through Medicaid, but our waiver supplements what they get. And so, the idea is what we should do a good job of at the team meeting is planning with a person the extent to which these waiver services are needed for your independence and the extent to which these waiver services are moving you toward independence. And how are we planning for that? And it should not be an abrupt, you can find that elsewhere. It should be working together as a team to identify what it will be, trying it out, making sure it works, and then having a transition. We have 80 service coordinators doing the very best they can. On occasion, is there a problem? Yes, but as Sandy from Disability Rights DC referenced, we are doing a much better job now. We now have a form which makes sure that things get done consistently, that is completed by service coordinators each time that they may be denying, terminating, or reducing a service. And the possibility down at the bottom of that form that it says, will the service continue, would be if you're denying a new service request. Well, we're not going to put the service in place if we told you no. So the answer to the question there would be no.
Gotcha. So I guess I can understand DDS's preference that the state plan services are exhausted for all services before enrolling in the waiver. What I was trying to understand is under the requirements of the waiver, I'm trying to understand from chair perspective, what services is DDA allowed to enroll in waiver without exhausting services under the state plan?
Something that's not available in the state plan. So supported living isn't available in the state plan.
Got it. Okay.
And as I said, there are other considerations as well, whether there are natural supports, whether there are community-based supports, whether there's Medicaid support, and then we get to the waiver.
Now, the one I was really, I'm curious about was your testimony also mentioned the working group recommending expanding the use of assistive technology and remote supports. I'm I'm curious why the working group identified this as a cost-saving measure, only because unlike other cost-saving measures, assistive technology and remote supports have upfront cost. Is DDS going to be able to pay for the upfront cost as it awaits savings from implementing the plan?
So assistive,
Them.
the assistive technology, purchasing equipment for the person is in our waiver. And so we can pay up to, I want to say $10,000. And if I'm wrong, I'll correct this later. But we can pay to purchase equipment for the person, and that is in the waiver. We would be responsible for the 30% local share, and that is already calculated in our waiver. The significant piece that's made this difficult is, so when you do remote supports, you've got to have a base, and there are the costs of implementing that infrastructure. We have, with the use of ARPA funds, funded 3 providers to be able to pay the upfront costs for that. And as I said, but between them, they anticipate serving at least 100 people utilizing remote supports, and that will give us a good sense. And then from there, we will, once we see how effective that has been, they're meeting monthly. They had their first monthly meeting after implementing, so we'll see how that goes. And if it does appear to be successful for increasing independence for people and for saving. And, you know, we have separate rates for remote supports, and you can see those in our waiver that's posted on our website.
And the thing
It's more help for the person than savings. The savings, the rate is not that much of a savings,
Right,
but the
that's what I imagined.
independence for the person is tremendous.
Got you. And I guess how are you all gonna make sure that expanding remote supports will not adversely affect supported persons, particularly through lowering the quality of care, and especially medical care?
So part of our remote supports is a requirement that a person have face-to-face contact with someone every day. They also have a requirement for on-call, and our rate includes a certain number of hours each day for face-to-face. So there is still a check-in every single day with the person. We learned during COVID that remote monitoring is not the same as in-person monitoring.
Yes, we learned that across agencies. So that's what I was referring to.
And we implemented in-person monitoring by the end of 2020. So
as you know, there are some senior residents who don't like technology overall, and they get frustrated with it. My mother being one, so I can just say that I can throw my own mother on the bus there. Anytime we ask her, she is told to move to technology of any sort, it gives her anxiety to the point that I literally have to be like, Mom, come, you can do this. What's going to be there for people who you may offer assistive technology and they say, I don't want it. I want a person. I don't want assistive technology. A lot of seniors are going to say this. I get, you know, I have a lot of seniors, and whenever we try to institute technology, not just in this context, but in any other context, right? There's some seniors right now upset because they're like, I'm not paying my rent online and I want to give a check and a money order. I'm telling you, this is like a real issue. So anytime you ask seniors to start using technology, I can tell you that they start to get anxiety and then they get upset, and it's a thing. I want to make sure when we start instituting assistive technology that if one of our participants says, hey, this isn't something, I know the agency thinks this is great, but it's not something that's great for me, are you all going to allow there to be the opportunity for them to appeal based on their preference?
that shouldn't even get to an appeal. This should be what the person wants. As an example, and this isn't on the DDA side, but as you're aware, in the Randolph-Shepard program, we reached out to all of the vendors asking what kind of accommodation they needed in terms of written material. And one of the people said, don't talk to me about using a computer, making large print on the computer. I'm not going to learn a computer. In my 80-some years, I haven't. I want you to record letters on a cassette tape and mail them to me. And that is what we are doing.
Okay. So I want to be clear. I do not believe cost saving measures are a bad thing per se. I'm glad we were able to go through each of these because there's some pros and cons to each of these. And I'm not opposed to, some of these plans in and of themselves. However, I and others are apprehensive about the timing, I want to be clear, of DDA's decision to implement these measures. And on that note, I just want to be clear as to whether DDA is making these changes because costs are higher than they should be, or that the district no longer has the money to pay for supports and services as we used to. And to that end, Director, would you consider DDA has been overspending over the last several years when it comes to paying for supported living rate structures?
Yes, and I'd want to, because of this issue in part of house rates, but also because of supporting people just in case, we all still have, even though it was next year, it will be 10 years since we exited Evans. I think that many people
Okay.
still have this anxiety of,
Yes.
they want to prevent anything, and that's not how, real people live their lives with some level of dignity of risk. And we need to make sure that we're allowing people to do that. And one thing, many of these changes, COVID really made too much noise in the data. Many of these changes, so in 2014, the settings rule was implemented, and we had to create a transition plan for how we would implement this. Our transition plan, I believe, was the second one in the country approved, and that was done in 2017. In 2019, DHCF reported that they were starting to see some savings related to some of the changes we were making, and then COVID came. And so what we are doing now is picking up where we were in 2019 and continuing to implement what is required to be implemented, which is that services get provided in the least restrictive, and having a person next to you is a restriction, in the least restrictive and most community integrated manner possible.
As you know, there's always certain amount of resistance to change. We saw this during the unwinding of public health emergency, particularly with the removal of flexibilities to companion services. And then we did see complaints about changes due to frustration that things were not going to be the same as they were over the last several years. But frankly, we also saw examples of services that were reduced or removed when they shouldn't have been and sort of were untimely, ultimately restored. Does DDA expect the number of appeals to increase due to these changes to waiver services?
No, we don't actually. And, some of what you learn when you get the appeal is how people may have made some missteps, and you're able to then identify the people who need ongoing training. We didn't just have, a one and done with the training. They have division-wide meetings every month. They have unit meetings every month. They identify individual people and individual units where they might need more support, and in an ongoing way are working with people to make sure that they understand. Some people hear it much more simply, which is reduce the service, which is not what it's about. It's about transitioning people into the community and only providing the level of service that they need.
Okay. And what is overall DDS's response to concerns that some of the reductions and terminations of waiver services are in violation of Medicaid due process rights through the arbitrary decisions without legal justifications?
As I said, 3 cases at OAH.
Okay. I will say this, I and others will be monitoring closely, not just the number of appeals, but how many of those appeals result in reversal of DDA decisions. And if the numbers tell us DDA is cutting services that people need, we're going to need to reevaluate the mentality and the strategy behind these cost-saving efforts.
I understand. As I said, 3 out of 2,000.
Does DDA plan to implement any cost-saving measures, including changes to policy or procedure, practices, or services that were not recommended by the working groups?
No. We did not go into as much detail about the changes to the house rate, but indicated that we would be doing that during the waiver amendment process. But when we brought it up, people thought that was fantastic.
Okay. My final point on these cost-saving measures is going forward, I really want DDA to be intentional, as I believe you are, about not overdoing changes just for the sake of cost savings, which sounds like is not what you've communicated to me is not the impetus of the reason. But I know every complaint I get about reduction or termination does not mean DDA did something wrong. But I also don't want DDA to dismiss all complaints of supported persons and their families as frustration about change and routine instead of legitimate concerns about the reductions and terminations adversely affecting the well-being of supported persons. And so can I get a commitment that when balancing saving money or providing necessary supports and services, DDA will choose the latter over the former?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Staying on waiver, I want to talk about the administrative fee. The administrative fee is the only CLIN line item that did not increase from the fiscal year 26. I think we've talked about the consequences of a low administrative fee on our disability provider network during the last two previous budgets. This committee was able to partially restore funding each time. This year, not only is administrative fee too low, but DDA is also requiring providers to fulfill more burdensome reporting requirements, which is what we heard, that will be paid for with the administrative fee. And in fact, we are all being told by providers that the cost of these reporting requirements alone is much higher than the total administrative fee. Has DDS met with the Coalition on Disability Service Providers about the reporting requirements since they were announced?
Well, I was just hearing that the meeting was canceled. I know that we did meet with, yes, we have met with them since it was announced. We announced it. We had a meeting with them. We changed how it would be implemented so that we could make it something that was less burdensome for them. And then they asked for a subsequent meeting. We meet with the Provider Leadership Coalition or Provider Coalition Leadership on a regular basis. And so I'm sure we will continue to talk about this issue in those meetings.
Can I have 2 weeks, so I need something to happen within the next 2 weeks, because before I can make decisions about changes to all the committee agencies' budgets, I need to understand sort of
Yes, I do want to say two things.
the differences.
I can make the commitment, except that I'll be leaving town next Wednesday. So, but my staff who implement this will be able to meet with them. And I do want to make a couple of important points. One is that we did not increase the CLIN lines. We increased the amount that will be paid for each of those other CLIN lines because of increased utilization of all of those. During 2026, we're serving more people by the end of the year than we were last year. So the cost in 27 will be higher. But it is not that we are paying, as Mr. Paragal indicated, we're not paying more for rent, for clothing, for food. Those CLIN lines did not go up. The admin cost, as we've said before, well, as I've said before, prior to implementing a requirement that exists in the human care agreement, I was at a loss to identify what the administrative burden of this human care agreement was at all. All that we do, because to the extent that we're talking, it's a reimbursement. We're paying them for food they've purchased, rent they've paid, utilities they've paid. It means writing a check. At that time, so prior to our human care agreement requires that they reserve receipts and that they provide them upon request. And so we've implemented a system for requesting that data, which we had not done previously. Other than that, the administrative burden of receiving money from us and paying bills did not seem burdensome. And what was detailed in the testimony last year was essentially, well, we use it for cost overruns in the waiver. In other words, that's extra money that falls to the bottom line that we use when we have had a robust public comment period for our waiver about whether our rates are adequate. We have an admin cost within the waiver, and they're using admin costs from the human care agreement to fund what they see as shortfalls in what they receive in the waiver. But within the human care agreement, prior to us implementing the requirement that they actually comply with what the human care agreement says about maintaining information about what's spent on each person and providing that to us on a quarterly basis, as I say, I'm at a loss to see what the administrative burden of receiving money and writing checks was.
So DDS recognizes that providers use the administrative fee for overtime of direct support professionals.
I know it since I heard it from Mr. Paragal a year ago.
Okay, and so,
We have overtime funded within the waiver. It is a line within each of the rates.
and I guess so then you do recognize that there would be less money for overtime due to the reporting requirements.
That's not what it's intended for. If there's a need for the waiver rates to change based on the need for increased funding for overtime, vacation, and training, then that should be made part of the public comment when we publish an amendment to our waiver. And it was not.
Okay. But what if those areas are not increased in the waiver? What should providers do to pay for them?
I mean, we have a mix of success amongst providers of being able to meet their financial obligations, both under the human care agreement and the waiver.
Okay, so I think there's a disagreement between whether the new requirements are burdensome to providers or not. It's clear the agency feels like it's not overly burdensome, it's not newly burdensome. Providers feel like it is overly burdensome and it's costing them. So I think that's the impasse here.
And we need to have a follow-up meeting. There
Right.
was one scheduled.
That was my last point here is I'm gonna insist that you all meet with residential providers as soon as possible and report back, because I have a job to do in 2 weeks to make this sustainable for providers and figure out what if anything our committee can do and needs to do to
Okay.
deal with this. I appreciate that. As announced last year, the mayor's proposed fiscal year 27 budget freezes the direct care professional wages. So no longer tying it to the 117.6% of the district's living. Earlier, we heard testimony about the impact of this freeze on the direct support professional workforce. Does DDS believe this freeze will result in more direct support workers leaving either the district or the industry? And if so, how does DDS intend to combat such an exodus? And if not, why not?
I mean, in part, I don't know that I'd say an exodus. I would be concerned year over year of seeing this occur. Because, as I said, it'll get closer and closer to the living wage. Currently, we're still, at this time, we're still at 117.6%. And so when the living wage goes up in July, we will be behind a little bit. I think that what we need to keep in mind is we're not just talking about the DSP workforce. We're also talking about across the city, other people that provide direct services.
That's true.
It was extremely costly to implement the DSP wage enhancement. The total cost for DDS, I believe, was around $140 million for 3 years of implementing the DSP wage increase. And so thinking about how do you keep doing this is a tremendous challenge. And, we are doing other things right now. We've made one of the amendments in our waiver that this could also create more pressure within that workforce, but we've made some changes to allow for career enhancement for DSPs, to allow for them to more easily be able to move up the ladder to become QIDP.
Yeah, I heard you. I appreciated the strategies you all identified earlier to try to deal with what we're experiencing and seeing across agencies and within your agencies. I just think in only a few years, there's going to be a little to no difference between the DSP wage and the living wage. And I think erasing many years and millions of dollars spent improving the DSP workforce capacity and DSP well-being. And so I guess, does DDS have a plan to address the tipping point? And are you working on this now? So we don't get to this point?
Our wage is still considerably higher than the surrounding jurisdictions as well. So that does help us in that regard. The bigger challenge is that's true for the district as a whole. And so while our DSP wage is higher, our living and our minimum wages are higher as well. And I think that every year as the administration is developing the budget, they look at what the costs are and the ability to make those changes.
Turning to the rental reimbursement cap, The rental caps are 20% below the median rent for a 1-bedroom and 31% below the median for a 2-bedroom. During last year's budget hearing, we talked about DDS's strong record with supported persons living within the district. What percent of supported persons are living within the district in fiscal year 26? And does DDS expect the number to decrease given current rents and rental caps?
I would have to get back to you on the exact percent, and I'm trying to remember if I have it somewhere here, because I saw it very recently with a whole list of where everyone lives.
Okay.
And keeping in mind that, I mean, for one, we currently have, I think it's 53 vacancies within supported living.
Okay.
So if a person were moving, they'd move into an existing
One of those
place.
vacancies. Okay.
Each time that a person's lease is renewed or that a person has to move, it's an individual decision.
Gotcha.
The caps are a general guideline. And in individual cases, we can go beyond the cap when the need is there. We don't see it. We have had people that move primarily. I do recall when I looked at the list, primarily they were living in Silver Spring, which is right over the line. And they are primarily close in the suburbs. We're not seeing people. The people who we have who live further out are people who are in host homes, where they're in a family setting in a bedroom community further out. But
Okay.
generally speaking, our folks in supported living,
Okay.
Hyatt's, Philadelphia, Silver Spring.
Okay. In addition to needing to move to Maryland, there's also concern that the current rental caps for supported persons to live in small specific areas of the district that may have fewer resources, which of course this goes against the Olmstead's integration mandate. Does DDS believe the current rental caps hinder integration of supported persons across the district?
No, and that's actually, it's something that we're required to evaluate as part
Right.
of our transition plan, and we do, to make sure that people are not clustered too closely together so that they're not integrated into the community. We
Okay.
do have certain areas where you do see more people, and you do want that to some degree. I mean, I've thought before people may make friends amongst other people who are supported with them. So living close to your friend is a good thing, as well as you don't want to cluster everyone together.
Yeah. I want to turn to RSA. Director, you mentioned the RSA's federal grant was reduced by 2.3 million because we did not meet the requirement in 2023 and expect additional penalties for missing it in 2024 and 2025. With tightening budgets, I don't think we can be leaving 2.3 million on the table. Why did we miss the maintenance of effort requirement in 23, 24, and 25?
Because of prior year reductions in our local funding. And so by 23, when we were coming out of the period where we had all these extra funds because of the enhanced FMAP on the DDA side, we had more challenges meeting. The local match requirement for the VR grant is 21.3%. Our grant in those years was $15 million. Our maintenance of effort requirement was well over $8 million. We were over 50% matched. So when we missed the maintenance of effort one year, to some degree, we intentionally missed it the next year, because otherwise you would have a maintenance of effort local funds requirement that one year is 8 million and the next year it's 6 million. Then it's back to 8 and then 6. So it made for more consistent budget planning. Our maintenance of effort is now closer to what our match requirement is.
Okay.
And just, it was sort of coincidentally, after many years of not providing one, the Department of Education provided a cost of living increase to our VR grant in April of 2025. And that increased the grant from like 15.6 to 17.5 million, something like that. With the maintenance of effort penalty, we've essentially just lost the cost of living increase that they gave us, or we've deferred the cost of living increase until we get past this period of right-sizing our maintenance of effort. The other thing that is available to us is many states are unable to meet their match. In August every year, states that can't meet their match have to return grant funds, and they do what's called reallotment. And so that states that are overmatched can seek reallotment funds. We continue to have our local funds budget at the higher grant amount
Mm-hmm.
to match the higher grant amount. So to the extent we needed those additional funds, we could seek it as well during the reallotment process.
Got it. And is that your intention to do?
I expect this year it's not going to be necessary. We
Okay.
carried over much of our grant last year.
Okay.
And so, but it would be something we will pay attention to all year. And to the extent it's necessary, we feel like we're in a good place to do it.
Okay. When does RSA expect to be able to meet the requirement?
The maintenance of effort requirement?
Yeah.
So it's been reduced. So in FY26, we will meet the
will
maintenance
meet
of
it.
effort requirement because
Okay.
we've got that reduced
you've got it.
maintenance of effort. Right.
Okay, that's great. Okay. As always, we're going to end with Randolph Shepherd. In February, we talked about how things were seemingly getting better with the program. It seems some of the issues were not resolved with the closing of the Office of Administrative Hearing Cases. Are you aware that there has been, I guess there's a case filed against DDS in federal court now?
Not against us, no. Not that I'm aware of.
It's
There is a Randolph Shepherd matter in federal court, but
Uh-huh.
not
Not
against
us.
DDS. It's so the Secretary of Defense asserted that the Randolph Shepherd priority undermined the United States. They tried to put people off Army bases, and there is a case. The district is joining the case. If there's a case in federal court that I'm not aware of,
Okay.
I expect I'll get a text right now from my attorney back there
Okay.
telling me. But that's the federal case I'm aware of, and the district is planning to join that case. We
Okay.
have it's about Army bases right now. We have no Army bases in DC, but the Secretary of Education, when the Secretary of Defense requested that they waive the preference, waived it. And with no hearing, no arbitration, nothing, she just waived it. Our concern is that that's a slippery slope and that they could start to erode the Randolph Shepherd preference across other federal agencies. So we do think this case is important. And so
Okay.
that's why the district is joining it.
Okay. Based on what I was looking up, I think there was something, the court ordered OH to file a record with the court by May 11th. So, look into whatever this pending case is that has been filed. Looks like. And if you all could just basically keep us updated on the status of the litigation. Afterwards, I'll share with you what we're seeing on the system.
And you're saying in federal court?
Yeah, District Columbia Court of Appeals.
Oh, DC Court of Appeals.
Maybe. We'll confer with you afterwards, but we just want to make sure that
Okay. That could be someone who had filed an appeal to an OAH proceeding.
okay.
That would be, because the OAH proceedings go directly to the DC Court of Appeals.
Okay. All right.
I'll follow up
But
on
we'll
what that
follow
is
up.
and give you an update.
Okay. We just want to make sure we have any update on any of the pending litigation around it, because we're hopeful that we were in a good spot, in a good space, and we want to continue on that path that we've been on. And so I just need DDS and RSA to continue to do a great job of listening to vendors and, where appropriate, provide accountability across the board.
I'm meeting with the vendors every other week currently in
Great.
their policy committee. So things are going quite well right now with the Randolph Shepherd program.
All right. And last question, I was trying to end evenly at 2:30 here. As you know, the DC Healthcare Alliance program is undergoing significant changes due to budget cuts. Can you explain if and how DDS and the agency supports are going to be affected by this?
We have a person in.
That's it.
So the way that it affects people is not as much that they get healthcare through the DC Health Alliance as the eligibility for our services is that you're Medicaid eligible or you're eligible for the DC Healthcare Alliance. And these people would no longer be eligible for DC Healthcare Alliance as of October 2027. And so that's something that would need to be, and I say these people, it's actually this person. We're currently supporting one person who gets waiver services, and their eligibility was based on being eligible for the DC Healthcare Alliance. And as an adult, they would no longer be eligible. So that will be something that will need to be addressed a year from now.
Okay, great. All right, I want to thank you, Director. I think there's two main follow-ups that need to happen because we're in this tight moment. The admin fee a meeting and hopefully a meeting of the minds, or some type of thing that can come to me to figure out what our committee can do and cannot do to resolve some of the issues and the burdens that providers are experiencing. And so if you and the team can get that done so that we can figure out as a committee what we can do there. The other obviously is continued this cost of the waiting list and this calculation that is able or unable to be done. If money is added, what would it be used for? If we as a committee move forward in adding money, we just need to come to our budget office. I need to be able to explain to my budget office what you all tried to explain here, but didn't.
I get it.
Okay.
I've been trying.
I know.
I'll
Okay.
consult with someone and do better next.
Okay. So those two things are of critical importance for me and the committee, and the things that we're going to try to fill the hole on or make whole for providers and participants across the board. So thank you for that. Again, thank you all for the robust testimony that you gave, and so, as well. This concludes today's budget oversight hearing for the Office of Disability Rights and the Department of Disability Services. I want to thank our amazing and talented CART service providers and our amazing ASL interpreters and council support services. We could not make this hearing accessible without them. So a reminder that the final deadline to submit written testimony is 5 p.m. on Thursday, May 7th. You can do so by uploading your testimony to the council's hearing management system or emailing facilities@dccouncil.gov. With that, the time is 2:34 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.